Chapter 641, Fang Yuan vs. Giant Sun's Will 2. Fang Yuan had, just a moment ago, conversed with Mo Yao's will, and these few sentences were exchanged at lightning speed. Unfortunately, Giant Sun's will noticed this tiny moment and attacked at the point when Fang Yuan was slightly distracted. Giant Sun's will had incredible methods at controlling the fight. He was even stronger than Fang Yuan at grasping battle opportunities. Bam! A loud bang. Fang Yuan crashed on the ground harshly, rocks were sent flying and the ground was shaking slightly. Giant Sun's will followed closely after, adding salt to the wound. It turned into a golden sword again. The blade was extremely sharp and fast. It stabbed after leaving a golden trail in the air. Fang Yuan had no way to resist. At the crucial moment, Mo Yao's will manipulated water pavilion and turned it back into a liquid armor, preserving Fang Yuan's life. Giant Sun's will stabbed again and again, causing huge ripples to appear on the liquid armor. Quickly stand up. Mo Yao's will shouted anxiously. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth. He used his remaining left arm to support his body off the ground, enduring the strong impact of Giant Sun's wills as he stood up. It is useless, you cannot kill me. I have stored all of your own, Giant Sun's, immortal essence in my immortal aperture. Ha ha ha. Fang Yuan laughed crazily, attempting to break Giant Sun's will's fighting spirit. But his words caused it to become even more furious. The attacks became faster. He was stabbing at several times the original frequency. Crack. Because he had exceeded his limit, Giant Sun's will's thoughts were destroying themselves too. But because of the furious attacks, the liquid armor could not defend against it. Occasionally, the sword would pierce through. Fang Yuan laughed unceasingly, as he protected his brain. In addition, as long as his mind was protected, he would not be invaded by Giant Sun's will. He did not care how many times his organs were stabbed. The liquid armor was pierced through continuously, but also recovered rapidly. Emitting a blue glow, Fang Yuan's body was nourished as his injuries healed. Quickly dodge. At this rate, my immortal essence is expending too rapidly. Mo Yao's will reminded him frantically. No. This is a rare chance. We have to endure it. Fang Yuan refused, standing at the same spot enduring the frantic attacks of Giant Sun's will. Even if your immortal essence is used up, you can lend water pavilion to me. I still have over 20 green grape immortal essence beads. Giant Sun's will went crazy. He is doing something very stupid, that is to consume his own thoughts for strong attacks. At this rate, the amount of thoughts he destroys would surpass the damage I have been dealing to him. This. Mo Yao's will went into deep hesitation. The two were expending resources intensively, falling into a stalemate. Should we go and assist old ancestor? Gu tribe leader Gu Guolong asked. While Fang Yuan was fighting Giant Sun's will, Hei Lou Lan led everyone and captured many Gu worms. They had recovered their battle strength. The reason they were able to capture Gu worms so easily was because there were still many Gu worms inside the wind veil. Meanwhile, the number of formless hands was decreasing. With Gu worms in their possession, they were no longer scared. In addition, because they saw that Fang Yuan was on the ground taking hits from Giant Sun's will, not just Gu Guolong, the other Gu masters were also moved and wanted to go in and fight. Hei Lou Lan was silent, watching the surroundings. The wind veil of assimilation continued to spread, the wind walls getting thicker as the space inside was unceasingly being squeezed between. Out of their survival instincts, Gu worms could only fly inwards. Thus, the density of Gu worms became even higher. They were all over the place. In fact, sometimes, a Gu master only needed to stretch out his hand and grab beside him to capture a Gu worm. Crack. On the ground below, cracks started forming. This was a sign that the area was collapsing. Far away, a huge spherical light halo was created again. Wisdom Gu, which had been sent flying by giant Sun's will earlier, seemed to have sensed the danger of extermination as it exerted all of its strength to defy its fate, preventing other existences from getting near it. All this showed that, there was not much time left. Hei Lou Lan decided not to wait anymore. He nodded and shouted, "Everyone listen to my command, we will attack together, do not cause internal conflict and weaken our offensive." Everyone nodded, their expressions were serious. To them, killing Fang Yuan was the same as surviving this crisis. However, just when Hei Lou Lan and the others were about to strike, Giant Sun's will suddenly laughed loudly, "Fang Yuan, you have fallen into my trap." Saying this, he retreated quickly. Wills had almost no mass, he retreated as he liked, taking a huge number of steps back in the blink of an eye. What? Fang Yuan's pupils shrunk, he saw a formless hand grabbing at him. He shouted in shock, "Seven-fingered formless hand." It turns out, when Giant Sun's will was pretending to fight with Fang Yuan, even using self-destruction to lure Fang Yuan into tanking the hits, his frenzied attacks were only to attract all of Fang Yuan's attention, to obscure his vision so that this formless hand could be lured over. In the Wind Vale, although there were decreasing numbers of formless hands, a large number of them still remained. Giant Sun's will lacked immortal essence, he could not use Immortal Gu, but he had never relied on Hei Lou Lan and the others. His plan was to use the external force called Formless Hands. He split out a small portion of his will, carrying several Immortal Gu to attract the Formless Hand. The Formless Hand was faster than Giant Sun's will. Giant Sun's will thus split up into 10 wills that carried Immortal Gu each at regular intervals. Once the Formless Hand got near, he would destroy the Immortal Gu. The Formless Hand did not have any gains. After feeling the aura of the next Immortal Gu, it would go over. Your F. Vorite stories on /o/v/lb n.c m. This way, after Giant Sun's will lost 8 Immortal Gu, the Formless Hand was finally lured over. Quickly dodge it. Mo Yao's will screamed. It's too late. Fang Yuan had already darted away, simultaneously activating Eagle Rise Gu. But it was no use, he needed time to accelerate, but the Formless Hand had already arrived. At the moment of life and death, Mo Yao's will sighed gloomily. She suddenly activated Water Pavilion and had it leave Fang Yuan, crashing towards the 7-fingered Formless Hand. The 7-fingered Formless Hand grabbed, and immediately took away the rank 7 Immortal Gu that formed part of Water Pavilion, Water Harmony Gu, away. Water Pavilion was a rank 7 Immortal Gu house. It was made up of over 3,000 Gu worms. Each of the Gu worms were interlinked and connected to each other. Their core was the rank 7 Water Harmony Immortal Gu. Other than that, there were 2 supporting Immortal Gu, the rank 6 Movement Immortal Gu Worldly Wave Trace, and the Wisdom Path Immortal Gu Delight in Water and Mountain. Right now, the one and only core, Water Harmony Immortal Gu, was taken away by the Formless Hand. Water Pavilion broke down immediately. "Ha ha ha, let's see what you can use to block me now." Giant Sun's will laughed continuously. He paid a huge price and obtained the result he wanted to see. The Formless Fist carried the Water Harmony Gu and flew into the sky. "Quickly destroy it." Mo Yao's will screamed. The remainder of the over 3,000 Gu worms carried Red Date Immortal Essence as they floated around Fang Yuan. Without her reminder, Fang Yuan had already begun to do that. He used all of his Movement Gu, chasing the Formless Fist and attacking fiercely. Giant Sun's will snorted, blocking them. "We will strike too." Hei Lou Lan and the others saw the good chance and came to join in, attempting to thwart Fang Yuan's plans. "You've come at the right time." Giant Sun's will praised loudly. He changed his battle tactic and stopped blocking Fang Yuan, turning into a bright rainbow and attacking him instead. Fang Yuan was faced with the Gu Master's attacks, but he did not mind it. He could use 6-arm Heavenly Zombie King to resist them. But Giant Sun's will's attacks were very threatening to him. Giant Sun's will did not block Fang Yuan at all. His battle tactic was, go ahead and chase it, I'll let you. In the process of chasing it, I will kill you. Water Pavilion was broken apart, Mo Yao's will could no longer provide him any defense. Fang Yuan got into an even more dangerous situation. Hei Lou Lan and the others' attacks were troublesome, they hindered his speed. Pop! Giant Sun's will slammed, turning into a monk's spade as he changed directions, cutting the goo worms circulating around Fang Yuan into two segments. Oh no, my red date immortal essence. Mo Yao was caught off guard. Not only were many goo worms destroyed by Giant Sun's will, the red date immortal essence was taken by Giant Sun's will. There were already few red date immortal essence left, now they were completely gone. Mo Yao was stunned. Mo Yao, I'll open my aperture, quickly come in. Fang Yuan shouted, retreating rapidly at the same time. The technique of Giant Sun's will was ongoing and he could not give chase immediately. Fang Yuan was able to pull some distance. He snorted, flying over quickly in pursuit. During this time, Mo Yao's will moved the remaining Immortal Gu and together with them entered Fang Yuan's immortal aperture. Quickly lend worldly wave trace Gu to me. Fang Yuan urged. Mo Yao's will did not hesitate at all, shouting, since I have no immortal essence left anyway, I'll lend these Gu to you. Although Fang Yuan had obtained many immortal Gu earlier, he did not have time to refine them, he could only suppress them with his will. There were only two Gu he did not suppress with his will, Tai Bai Yun Xing's man as before and landscape as before. It was a pity that he did not obtain Tai Bai Yun Xing's permission, thus Fang Yuan could not use them. After obtaining Mo Yao's agreement, Fang Yuan immediately used the rank 6 Immortal Gu. He shouted while using one bead of green grape immortal essence, activating worldly wave trace. This Gu was like a jellyfish, it was the size of a baby's fist, wrapping around the green grape immortal essence as it consumed it. Swoosh! A huge wave appeared below Fang Yuan's feet, bringing Fang Yuan away at rapid speed, pulling distance away from Giant Sun's will. Worldly wave trace was a rank 6 Immortal Gu. Although Fang Yuan was not a water path Gu immortal, he had rank 6 cultivation and could activate it fully. Giant Sun's will was stunned. This was the first time Fang Yuan was able to shrug him off since the battle began. But he was merely slightly shocked, snickering immediately after, if this was the outside world, I would be helpless against you. But inside this wind veil of assimilation, the space is becoming more limited. Go ahead and run, as time passes, I will eventually catch you. Give up on struggling, you destroyed 88 True Yang building and ruined Imperial Court blessed land, and you still want to leave? Humph, don't think of the impossible, you are dead meat. Don't worry, if I die, I will drag all of you with me, don't think of leaving unscathed. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, his green face and sharp fangs made him look extremely vile and ruthless. Then come and battle, don't run away if you have the guts. Although Giant Sun's will could not catch up to Fang Yuan, he chased behind with menacing killing intent. Fang Yuan did not dare to fight it. He did not have Water Pavilion to protect his brain. Once he exposes a weakness in battle, Giant Sun's will would invade his mind. By then, he would fall into confusion again and be unable to think. He would be meat on the chopping block, without any way to fight back. However, Giant Sun's will's earlier words were not wrong. As the wind veil of assimilation spreads, the space would get smaller. Eventually, it would become small to the extent where Fang Yuan cannot dodge, and would be killed by Giant Sun's will. Chapter 642, 38 Sealing Arts. Giant Sun, I admit your power. But don't forget that all of your Giant Sun's immortal essence is in my immortal aperture. Without any immortal essence, how will you use Immortal Gu? You have no chance of breaking through the wind veil of assimilation just by relying on your special will. Fang Yuan's thoughts were racing as he attempted to negotiate with Giant Sun's will. Want to negotiate? Ha ha ha. Giant Sun's will laughed loudly, not concealing the hatred within. Why would I negotiate with you? Won't it be the same if I kill you and seize the immortal essence back from your immortal aperture? Why don't you try to destroy the immortal essence? You might even succeed. Giant Sun's will was self-confident. It was not that the immortal essence could not be destroyed, but at the moment it was not possible. If Fang Yuan destroyed the immortal essence in his own immortal aperture, the foreign immortal essence would inflict serious harm to his immortal aperture. This would be the same as seeking his own doom. If he destroyed the immortal essence outside his body, the scattered immortal essence aura would instead help Giant Sun's will to activate Immortal Gu. Fang Yuan, I won't compromise. You can't fight me and can't escape either. What can you still do? Just let it be, die quickly. Giant Sun's will taunted while chasing. Fang Yuan did not respond and only concentrated on fleeing. As time passed, the wind veil of assimilation was creeping closer. It made no sound, but it devoured everything in its path, assimilating everything. The space Fang Yuan could flee to was shrinking. As Giant Sun's will intercepted his paths, Fang Yuan was facing great dangers all around him. Giant Sun's will, I will stand here, do you dare to come? Fang Yuan suddenly stood still and stopped using worldly wave trace Immortal Gu. Giant Sun's will, however, stopped chasing. They were still hundreds of steps afar, but it did not dare to move closer. Humph, I already expected you would make such a choice. He scoffed in disdain, but so what? You are only delaying your death by a few moments. I will watch as you die. The area Fang Yuan was standing on was the area covered by the light of wisdom. The light of wisdom was the bane of Giant Sun's will. Giant Sun's will could only stop its chase. Through this intense battle, its remaining will was only the volume of an adult man, and could no longer endure any more severe exhaustion. Fang Yuan, your lifespan. Mo Yao's will warned. There is no other way, tell me, what else can I do in this situation? Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, his tone filled with hatred and extreme helplessness. Standing in the light of wisdom, Fang Yuan could clearly feel his lifespan was decreasing unceasingly, but he did not have any other choice. Giant Sun's will hated him to the extreme and gave him no chance to make compromises. Sigh. Mo Yao's will heaved a long sigh. This is simply a struggle at death's door. Perhaps Wisdom Gu might stop sending out the light of wisdom in the next moment. Fang Yuan was silent. Giant Sun's will suddenly shouted to Hei Lou Lan's group, go deal with this thief. Most of his defensive Gu have already perished in our fight. Force him nearer to Wisdom Gu where the light of wisdom is much stronger, his lifespan will be used up even faster. Let me see how much lifespan he can waste. Hei Lou Lan's group accepted the order immediately. Even Hei Lou Lan with his great strength true martial physique did not want to fight Fang Yuan in close combat. They had long ago discussed as appropriate and right now, all of them used long-range attacks. Inside the light of wisdom, Fang Yuan gave a cold snort and used his Gu to counterattack with his own long-range attacks while maintaining defensive Gu. 4 to 5 layers of light barriers covered his body, tens of bone shields hovered around him, and occasionally, stone barriers emerged from the ground to shield him from the attacks of Hei Lou Lan's group. Ordinary defensive Mortal Gu were not of much use against Giant Sun's will. But they were still effective in dealing with these Mortal Gu masters. Fang Yuan cultivated strength path and was not specialized in long-range battle. However, he had no shortage of long-range attacking Gu worms, it was only that they did not follow a proper fighting system. More importantly, he had unlimited primeval essence. Thus, He was not at any disadvantage and the situation was even many times better compared to when he fought with Giant Sun's will. Speed up the attacks, don't stop for even a moment. Even if he has unlimited primeval essence, Mortal Gu cannot be activated non-stop. Hei Lou Lan shouted. Right. Mortal Gu are not Immortal Gu and have a limit to what they can endure, activating them unceasingly will only cause them to collapse. Yi Lui Sang also added. They were tribe leaders of Hei tribe and Yi Lui tribe, they understood the situation deeply. Gu were the essence of heaven and earth, carriers of the great Tao. Essentially, they were tools. Every tool has their own respective usage. The more they were used, and when the burden on them crosses the limit, they will start breaking down. When Mortal Gu masters used Mortal Gu, they could only activate the Gu worms a few times because of the limitations in primeval essence, thus this flaw was not too evident. When Gu Immortals activated Mortal Gu, this issue would become conspicuous. However, after some time, Hei Lou Lan's group's hopes came to nothing. Why does he have so many Gu worms? Someone shouted in an incredulous tone. The quantity of Fang Yuan's Gu worms surpassed their imagination. During the course of the fight, he switched Gu worms one after another as if it was very natural and effortless. Even if he has a mysterious origin and made prior preparations for Gu Immortal advancement, preparing many Mortal Gu, a mortal aperture is not able to hold so many Gu. No one could explain this no matter what they thought of and were bewildered. Could it be? Giant Suns will recalled the scene of Fang Yuan opening a stargate. Fang Yuan had opened a stargate within 88 Truyang building, thus Giant Suns will knew it clearly. It seems he relied on that gateway to leave Imperial Court blessed land and obtain significant support. Giant Suns will was very experienced and knowledgeable, immediately realizing the usage of the stargate when it thought of whole Earth Gu and connecting Heaven Gu. It was thanks to Fang Yuan having Hu Immortal blessed land behind him that he was able to purchase large numbers of Mortal Gu from Treasure Yellow Heaven. Although he had given most of them to Tai Bai Yunsheng, he had also left many for himself. Fang Yuan's naturally cautious nature of being prepared for anything had paid off at this moment. Humph, you borrowed external strength. Unfortunately, your opponent is me. Giant Suns will gave a cold snort before suddenly making a move. He pierced the air at lightning speed. He did not move into the light of wisdom but shot towards the Gu worms. Several breaths later, he appeared above Hei Lou Lan's group and dropped a large group of Mortal Gu. Take it. I am going to impart a killer move to you. Giant Suns will split itself into a dozen or so parts which covered the Gu worms and directly moved into everyone's apertures. Every person received 38 Gu. These Mortal Gu had already been refined by Giant Sun's will. Under the coordination of Giant Sun's will, the group was able to immediately refine the Gu worms and learn the killer move through the directions of the special will. This killer move. Hei Lou Lan's group showed expressions of joy and shock when they comprehended the killer move. It is just a small trick my main body created when I had inspiration during my leisure time, I have not given it name yet. Giant Suns will said in a light tone, now is a good time to use it, for the time being let's call it 38 Sealing Arts. Hei Lou Lan's group immediately activated the killer move, breathing out rays of purple light chi from their mouths. Fang Yuan's eyes narrowed and he immediately dodged them. But he had limited space and the purple light chi mixed in with other attacks, as such he was still struck. So it was like this killer move's effect is this. Fang Yuan's expression changed slightly. 38 Sealing Arts was targeted against Gu worms. This concept was not unusual. A Gu master's battle strength came mostly from their Gu worms, thus many Gu worms targeted this point like rank 4 problem and nipped in the bud Gu, or rank 5 pitch black Gu. However, this killer move, 38 Sealing Arts, was much stronger than pitch black Gu. It could contaminate moves that were used by a Gu master, and all the Gu worms used for it would be sealed one after another. This killer move naturally could not seal Immortal Gu. And as for Mortal Gu, the higher the rank of the Gu, the shorter the duration of the seal. But it could seal them completely, and the Gu worms that formed this killer move were mostly ordinary and could be easily gathered. It touched upon Qi path, and even if an attacking Gu was used, it could follow the Qi back to the source, sealing the Gu. This was an exceptional killer move which particularly suited the current situation. After Fang Yuan was struck, his defensive Gu were sealed successively. The stone barriers were pervaded by the purple light Qi, the stone barrier shield Gu were immediately sealed. The white bone shields hovering around Fang Yuan were also shrouded in the purple light Qi, falling down one after another, turning back into flying bone shield Gu. The wind blades Fang Yuan attacked with were touched by purple light Qi, and even if the corresponding wind blade Gu were inside his aperture, the Gu worms would be covered by a faint layer of dense purple Qi and be sealed. Historically, sealing defensive Gu was easy while sealing attacking Gu was difficult, all because defensive Gu were easier to attack. But 38 sealing arts could deal with both equally. Fang Yuan's Gu worm quantity decreased the more he used them. He already did not have a lot of defensive Gu and could not forcibly resist the purple light Qi, only able to dodge and evade all over the place. But there was only so much space, he would sooner or later run out of space to run to. At this moment, Fang Yuan took the initiative to attack the purple light Qi. He would rather more of his attacking Gu be sealed, he required defensive Gu to protect his whole body. Once the purple light Qi touched his six-armed heavenly zombie king form, who is to say it might not seal the corresponding Gu worms and break the killer move six-armed heavenly zombie king. Soon, Fang Yuan's offensive started becoming sparser as he was suppressed into disadvantage by the crowd of Gu masters. Kill this demon! Yi Lui Sang shouted excitedly and sent out hundreds of fireballs. The fireballs detonated in an intense explosion with dust and dirt flying everywhere. Fang Yuan dodged here and there, but he was still struck by the explosions, his skin and flesh were torn open. You demon, you are guilty of the most heinous crimes, you went as far as daring to topple Truyang building. We ended up in this state all because of you. Gu Guolong shouted furiously, throwing out endless wind blades that were as sharp as knives and could also chase the target. New cuts were formed on Fang Yuan's body. Rays of purple light Qi were also constantly sent out now and then. These surviving Gu masters, more than 10 in number, gritted their teeth with eyes filled with fury. They wished they could eat Fang Yuan's flesh and drink his blood. They had painstakingly fought in many battlefields and taken huge risks to arrive at Imperial Court Blessed Land. It was supposed to have been an enormous opportunity, but they ended up in this plight. Almost all of their tribesmen, relatives and friends were dead. The disparity from the beginning to the end was too large. It could easily be imagined how much hatred and anger they felt towards the main cause of this disaster. You will die a dog's death today. This is your end for offending ancestor Giant Sun. One Gu master did not forget to flatter Giant Sun's will. It was a pity Giant Sun's will was not human and his expression could not be seen. Full 0W current novels on n/o/v/3l/b in.co/m. He only reminded everyone, do not cause harm to wisdom Gu no matter what. Chapter 643, Final Trump Card. Giant Sun's will was too strong. Not just his battle strength, but also his deep foundation. It inherited some of the Immortal Venerable's experience. Just a killer move created out of boredom drove Fang Yuan into a desperate state again. Damn it, is it time to use Spring-Autumn Cicada again? Fang Yuan gritted his teeth, a thought arising in his mind. The first aperture was filled with pressure, the surface of the aperture walls was covered with cracks resembling a spider's web. Spring-Autumn Cicada floated in the center, as yellow and green lights flickered on the cicada's body. Fang Yuan was not ignorant, the aperture had obviously reached its limits, it could break the very next second. But he quickly dispelled the thought of using spring-autumn cicada. More and more of his gu worms were being sealed, his firepower was weakening, Fang Yuan was starting to take hits passively. Come on, why don't you strike back? The gu masters laughed maniacally. Are you afraid now? Come out and fight if you have the guts. Someone laughed coldly. You demon, this is your deserved fate, go and die. Someone cursed. Seeing Fang Yuan suppressed by them, they felt unbelievable joy. Suddenly, Mo Yao's Will's frantic voice resounded in Fang Yuan's mind again, oh no. Fang Yuan, zombie speckles are showing up on your body. The death energy is starting to invade your body. If the speckles spread over your whole body, you will turn into a 6-armed heavenly zombie king for real. An even worse situation had arrived. The estimated hour limit had not been reached, but Fang Yuan was already starting to become a zombie. A body that is zombified will be completely immersed in death energy, they cannot return to normal. Unless he removed the 6-armed heavenly zombie king killer move now, the zombie speckles would continue to spread. No, once I stop using the killer move, giant suns would attack. At this distance, I would not be able to react. Fang Yuan shook his head, his expression turning solemn. Although he had defensive gu, these mortal gu were not worth mentioning in front of giant sun's will. Only 6-armed heavenly zombie king could allow Fang Yuan to hold his own. Right now, although giant sun's will had not entered the wisdom halo, that was only because the price to pay was too great for a small gain. Giant sun's will was definitely capable of making sacrifices. To attract a 7-fingered formless hand, he lost 8 immortal gu. If I cancel the killer move now, giant sun's will would go all out and kill me regardless of the sacrifice. Once I die, he would take back the immortal essence of giant sun, I cannot take this risk. Fang Yuan's attitude was firm. But, your body. Mo Yao's tone was hesitant, sounding worried. Fang Yuan was unmoved, his expression was determined. The zombie speckles continued to spread, there was only a dot on his back at first, but now almost his entire back was covered. The speed of spreading was getting faster, soon, Fang Yuan's chest turned black. The gu masters saw this and were shocked. Giant suns will laughed heartily, so this is it, you have turned into a zombie for too long, the balance of life and death energy had been broken, now that the death energy is invading you, you will turn into a real zombie, a member of the living dead, a monster that is neither human nor a ghost, your cultivation will be stagnant forever. Giant suns will had great experience and knowledge, he understood Fang Yuan's situation immediately. The gu masters felt a surge in morale, some laughed heartily, ha ha ha, persisting in evil brings about self-destruction, demon, you have committed too many wicked deeds, this terrible end is brought about entirely by yourself. Even without us attacking now, you are finished. Humph, members of the demonic path crave strength and disregard all else, you have finally experienced the painful consequences now. What a pity, even if you became an immortal luckily, you still became a zombie, a monster. This is the result of you toying with evil schemes and causing harm to everyone, being enemies with ancestor giant sun, and with us of the righteous path. Mo Yao's will urged as well, Fang Yuan, the price to pay is too huge. In my opinion, giant suns will might not necessarily attack, it does not have much strength left. You have great talent and ability, you should not end up like this. It is not too late to stop now, once you turn into a 6-armed heavenly zombie king for real, it will be far too difficult to revert back to being a human. Fang Yuan's gaze was shining, his emotions were in turbulence, as his expression was changing. But eventually, his gritted teeth did not loosen. He turned into a 6-armed heavenly zombie king completely. The speckles turned his body black, in the strength path immortal aperture, the bright and clear heaven and earth turned into an eerie dark color, white stone mountains collapsed one after another. The sky was dark gray and the land was rotting, there was not a trace of life energy. Meanwhile, in the first aperture, it was deathly silent too. The purple crystal aperture walls no longer had the crystal clear appearance, they looked like grey rocks. But precisely because of this, spring-autumn Cicada's pressure was no longer so threatening. Right after becoming a Gu Immortal, he degraded into a zombie. All his past accumulations, all his achievements, all turned into nothing. From this point on, his cultivation could not advance in the slightest. Without any potential to progress, in this regard, Fang Yuan was worse off than immortal. Even with Fang Yuan's iron will, he felt a bit of desolation. The thought of using Spring-Autumn Cicada appeared in his head once more. If I use Spring-Autumn Cicada and restart everything, I will be able to quickly retreat and avoid this terrible situation to the best of my ability. But Fang Yuan forcefully suppressed this thought. The wind veil of assimilation was very close now. Without any sound from the wind, it spread silently, compressing the space and bringing an immense mental pressure to all at the scene. Fang Yuan observed everyone from afar, suddenly doing something shocking. He stopped the activation of all his Gu. He had completely become a six-armed heavenly zombie king. He did not need to use Gu worms to activate it. N/W novel chapt. RS are published on no/vel/bin.co/m. As the purple light chi hit him, this move, 38 sealing arts, had no effect. As long as Fang Yuan did not activate his Gu worms, the purple light chi would not be able to follow the chi within and trace it back to the source, sealing the Gu worms. Everyone was stunned, even giant suns will gasped lightly. But next, the Gu masters erupted with fierce momentum. Kill this demon. He stopped using his Gu worms right in front of us, he is courting death. Everyone shouted, screamed, and yelled with their lungs. Fang Yuan retreated step by step, using the six-armed heavenly zombie king's defense and recovery speed to endure the attacks. Be careful, don't hit the wisdom Gu. Seeing that Fang Yuan was getting close to wisdom Gu, Hei Lou Lan quickly gave a reminder. The Gu masters controlled their firepower, no longer unleashing flashy attacks, but aiming more precisely at Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan's appearance was nothing like before. His chest was blown open, his bones were broken, and his intestines were smashed. He had no choice but to turn around, with his back facing everyone and using it to endure the intense attacks. Bam! A bolt of lightning struck Fang Yuan's back. An intense force slammed him to the ground. From behind him, cheering could be heard, "Ha ha ha, I beat him. This newly caught Gu is not bad, it should be the rank 5 Thunderhammer Gu." Fang Yuan crawled up in difficulty. His back was burst open, the injury was coiling with lightning, his spine and bones were exposed to the air. "Look at my wind path killer move." Someone shouted. Swoosh! A huge wind blade with jagged teeth spun and shot out, making a loop around Fang Yuan's arm and cutting it off. It fell on the ground. This person was breathing roughly, almost all his primeval essence had been expended, but his eyes were shining with a ruthless light of excitement. He shouted, "Did you see, did you see? I took away one of his arms." "Humph, you made use of that weakness. If the flesh and skin of that area of his arm hadn't already been fully removed, left with only a segment of his bone, would you be able to cut it off?" Someone scoffed. The body of six-armed heavenly zombie king was strong, but it could not endure such fast-paced and strong attacks. Everyone laughed wildly, they shouted and cheered, torturing Fang Yuan, feeling pride from the heavy injuries they were inflicting on him, competing against each other. Fang Yuan was defeated time and time again, his tall and muscular body was becoming smaller. But he got up every time. Even though he had 1 out of 8 arms remaining, even though he did not have a patch of undamaged skin left, even though his zombie blood was dyeing the ground, even though his organs were exposed to the air, even though his right shoulder was only left with a pale white shoulder blade. Why, to this extent? Why? Mo Yao's will sobbed. Fang Yuan was silent. Enough. Giant Sun's will suddenly spoke. The Gu masters did not dare to disobey him, they stopped attacking. At this point, are you still not giving up? Humph, your attitude is truly worth admiring. Giant Sun's will spoke in a milder tone. Enough, it is not easy for you to reach this extent. Give up, I will give you a chance to surrender, as long as you recognize me as your master, I will allow you to make up for your mistakes. What? Ancestor Giant Sun is sparing him? Ancestor, please reconsider it. Everyone was shocked. Surrender? Fang Yuan scoffed, let me consider it. Giant Sun's will continued, you destroyed 88 True Yang building, your sins are unforgivable. I will give you a chance to redeem yourself, after recognizing me as your master, you will help me to once again establish 88 True Yang building, that will make up for your sins. When True Yang building is rebuilt, not only will I grant you freedom, I will even get rid of your zombie status, and teach you the method to regain a human body. If someone else heard this, their heart would waver. Giant Sun's will gave Fang Yuan a way to live, most importantly, he gave him hope to continue cultivating. Fang Yuan was silent, let me consider. Giant Sun's will laughed plainly, I will not give you any chance to stall for time. I will count down from 10, you must give me a response. 10. Fang Yuan, are you really surrendering? Be careful of Giant Sun's will's schemes, as long as you get out, and leave the light of wisdom's range, you will be a fish on his chopping block, subject entirely to his treatment. Mo Yao's will worriedly reminded in Fang Yuan's mind. Fang Yuan laughed in his heart, how could I be so stupid as to believe him? Next, he sighed, oh, to think that I will still have to use my final trump card. You still have a trump card? To speak the truth, I have Spring-Autumn Cicada. What? Spring-Autumn Cicada. Don't tell me it's that 7th-ranked Gu among the top 10 mystical Gu worms in the world, it can travel upstream along the river of time, returning to the past, that Spring-Autumn Cicada which can change history. Mo Yao's will screamed. That's right. Chapter 644, Not Committing the Same Mistake Again, 1/2. That's right. Fang Yuan said, as he snickered in his heart, asking Mo Yao's will, you've been wanting me to use it, haven't you? Fang Yuan, what do you mean? How would I know that you have Spring-Autumn Cicada? Mo Yao's will stared blankly, before quickly denying it. He. Fang Yuan laughed, oh, Mo Yao, I am a naturally cautious person, I consider situations where I suffer defeat more than those of victory. Thus, from the moment you lurked in my mind, I had already considered the worst possible situation. What was the worst possible situation? That was the fact that the greatest mystery of me having Spring-Autumn Cicada and being reborn is known by you. I would assume, since the first time I entered Water Pavilion, your will had already known this secret, right? Mo Yao's will appeared in Fang Yuan's mind, she appeared extremely sincere as she shook her head, Fang Yuan, are you misunderstanding something? Fang Yuan ignored her, continuing, you knew this secret, but you pretended not to know, revealing yourself on your own initiative. Next, you pretended that you had let down Spirit Affinity House, showing a guilty expression as you purposely gave me the mission of returning Water Pavilion to Spirit Affinity House. In truth, this was a red herring. In order to obtain my trust, you truly racked your brains. You created 6-arm Heavenly Zombie King for me and taught me ink transformation along with other refinement path killer moves, assisting me in infiltrating True Yang building, as well as giving me multiple reminders in battle, acting as a strategist. These acts were to lower my wariness. At the same time, you had been changing my thoughts, subconsciously trying to influence my decisions, you had truly insidious intentions. Mo Yao's will raised her voice, showing some displeasure, lad, what is wrong with you? You are actually speaking of me in this way, did you hit your head? He he he. Mo Yao, you are very impressive, I truly suffered at your hands. Your acting was nearly flawless, I almost believed you. When giant suns will awaken, you urged me to leave this place, to take Water Pavilion and return to Central Continent. But at the same time, you were influencing my thoughts, causing me to make the choice of continuing to take risks. When facing Ma Hongyun, you urged me to help Ma Hongyun, but on the other hand, you altered my thoughts, triggering my killing intent and summoning my rage and excitement, causing me to impulsively attack Ma Hongyun and resulting in my black coffin luck increasing. Honestly, under normal circumstances, would consider the costs and benefits, how could I be so brainless? When I first saw Imperial Court Blessed Land's land spirit, Frost Jade Peacock, I learned about the conditions for ownership. After leaving Truyang Building, I actually recalled some events in my previous life, a certain person. My true nature is not so weak that I would be affected to that extent. All these are the deepest memories of my previous life that have been buried to the depths of my heart. It was all your doing. You struck in secret, and then while my mind was in turmoil, you attempted to look at the memories of my previous life. Mo Yao stared with her eyes wide open, her tone was unkind and aggrieved, sounding like the defense of one treated with injustice. Fang Yuan, all these were your choices, after landing in this state, you are refusing to admit your mistakes, instead, you are blaming it all on me. Fang Yuan laughed, ha ha ha, admit my mistakes, of course I admit my mistakes. My foundation is superficial, especially when compared to you or Giant Sun, experience and insight are no longer to my advantage. But do you know what your greatest flaw was? Mo Yao's will snorted, folding her arms in front of her, lad, I am going to get angry if you continue speaking like this. All along I have been helping you, is this how you treat your benefactor? Fang Yuan did not listen to her, he ignored this and continued speaking. Your greatest flaw was that you actually sent Water Pavilion to charge at the seven-fingered Formless hand. The mission you gave me was to return Water Pavilion to Spirit Affinity House. Discover N. W. Chapt. R.S. NN0. Why was it that at the crucial moment, you gave up on Water Pavilion to protect me? Don't tell me that during these days of being together, you changed your principles and had started caring for me? I can admit my charisma has not reached that level. This is enough to show, the so-called mission you gave me was a red herring. Fang Yuan's voice was plain, but Mo Yao's will listen to it like it was rumbling thunder. She sank into silence. This time, she did not refute him. Fang Yuan laughed lightly, continuing, other than this, you had more flaws. First, you placed Water Pavilion on my body but concealed that fact. Evidently you were hiding ill intentions, wanting to control me using this rank 7 Immortal Gu house during a crucial moment. Second, if you were truly going to cooperate with me, why would you hide what kind of will you were? This indicates that the moment your type of will was exposed, I would be suspicious of you. Third, you purposely gave me an incorrect timing so that my body would completely turn into that of 6-armed heavenly zombie king. After I became a zombie, I felt desolation, that was also because of you. Fourth, you played tricks multiple times and secretly influenced my thoughts, making me think of using Spring-Autumn Cicada repeatedly. I am a person with a firm will. I do not hesitate. Once I decide on a plan, I will execute it without doubt. How could I have this same thought multiple times? Fifth, since you had little immortal essence, and I had become a Gu immortal, why did you not lend me Water Pavilion earlier? Evidently, you had other plans. Mo Yao's will laughed loudly, retorting, Fang Yuan, your words are contradicting yourself. Don't forget, I was the one who saved your life. If I did not use Water Pavilion, you would have been killed by Giant Sun's will. Now, you are saying that I purposely harmed you, lying about the timing of 6-armed heavenly zombie king and causing the transformation to be permanent. In this way, I have saved you and harmed you. Am I crazy? Of course you are not crazy. In fact, all along you have been very clear-minded. First you harm me, then you save me, all these were part of your plans. If I was you, thinking in your perspective, it is not hard to guess your intentions. After pausing for a while, Fang Yuan continued, if I was a will and had remained in this world for 10,000 years, after my main body was already dead and my lover was also dead after a failed tribulation, at this point, when I see the Spring-Autumn Cicada, what would I think? The answer is obvious. I would naturally want to make use of the Spring-Autumn Cicada and travel back in time. Spring-Autumn Cicada's effect is to sacrifice everything that the Gu Master has, merely preserving their consciousness in the Gu. At the crucial moment, I would sneak into the Spring-Autumn Cicada and destroy the Gu Master's will, replacing him and going back to the past to revive myself, altering history and changing my fate. Fang Yuan had a sound analysis. He exuded self-confidence and an extraordinary attitude. Mo Yao's will's pupils shrunk, she fell into silence again. Fang Yuan continued, however, for you to fulfill this goal, there were many difficulties, mainly, there were two big obstacles. Firstly, you are just a will, no matter what kind of will you were, you cannot use most Gu worms on your own. Spring-Autumn Cicada is not only such a case, it needs even more. It needs the Gu Master to self-detonate, using their essence, flesh, and all other Gu worms as sacrifices to become the driving force to propel the Gu Master back to the past. The stronger the fuel, the further into the past it can return. Secondly, Spring-Autumn Cicada is my Gu worm, my vital Gu. In fact, it is not ordinary. You are not a formless hand, you cannot take it away from me by force. I had also found many wisdom path Gu worms, and can create many types of wills, thus it was even more difficult for you to snatch it. Therefore, you had no choice but to continue interacting with me and waiting for an opportunity in accordance with the situation. On one hand, you needed to strengthen me and raise my foundation, that way, the force of my self-detonation would create more driving force when activating Spring-Autumn Cicada. On the other hand, you needed to create a situation of absolute despair for me, so that I had no choice but to take a major risk, left with no options but to use the Spring-Autumn Cicada. Saying this, Fang Yuan sighed, I was vigilant of you earlier, but as you gradually affected my thoughts, I eventually fell for your schemes and arrangements. You influenced me secretly, causing me to take risks time and time again in True Yang building, and even inducing me to deal with Ma Hongyun, to deal with Giant Sun's will, and Hei Lou Lan. Many matters were obviously disadvantageous to me and irrational, but I still acted on impulse time and time again. You caused me to make strong enemies, to create a situation where I would be desperate. But on another hand, you were afraid of going overboard and causing me to die. Thus, at the crucial moment, when my life was at stake, you had to make a move and expose Water Pavilion, in order to help me survive Giant Sun's will's fatal blow. Thus, when I was about to be captured by the Formless Hand, you activated Water Pavilion and crashed into it. You were afraid of it taking away my Spring-Autumn Cicada, you were afraid of the Spring-Autumn Cicada being exposed. The conversation between wills was extremely rapid, even though they had talked a lot. But after Fang Yuan said that, Mo Yao's will did not reply for a long time. It was silence in his mind. In the outside world, Giant Sun's will had already counted down to 6 from 10. Eventually, Mo Yao broke the silence, clapping as she laughed, he, good analysis. You really unraveled the mystery step by step, it was very meticulous and clear. To think that I had planned for such a long time, yet I did not manage to deceive you. I am really amazed by you, lad, even as a reborn person, your talent is simply astounding. If you were born in my time, we might have been good friends, who knows? What a pity, what a pity. Fang Yuan had understood everything, this was Mo Yao's will laying her cards on the table. Mo Yao's will could not pretend any further, at this moment, she chose to confess. Her body was slim and beautiful, a black veil covered her face, even though she was a will, she was like a night lotus silently floating in the dark, she had a graceful bearing and a grand disposition. As expected of Spirit Affinity House's 36th generation fairy, a rank 7 Gu Immortal, a refinement path grandmaster. Even though her schemes were exposed, she was not embarrassed or ashamed. Seeing that there was no hopes of continuing her facade, she showed a plain attitude, extremely forthright. She sighed, back then, when my main body took a risk to enter 88 True Yang building, I obtained an inheritance in the True Inheritance secluded domain, creating this will of mine with it. I left behind the Chiu inheritance, on one hand, I was preparing for any accidents, to preserve the chance of refining Calamity Beckoning Gu. On the other hand, it was a trap targeting Spirit Affinity House. Back then, I had betrayed my sect for Bo Qing, but I did not expect that 10,000 years later, it would be you who came. Actually, back when you refined Calamity Beckoning Gu, I had already discovered your Spring-Autumn Cicada. I am a refinement path grandmaster, I tampered with the Immortal Gu refinement process, the Calamity Beckoning Gu that you refined already had my will in it. This arrangement was originally meant to target pursuers from Spirit Affinity House, because nobody can stand giving up the chance of refining an Immortal Gu. Chapter 645, Not Committing the Same Mistake Again. Just as you said, when I first discovered that you had Spring-Autumn Cicada, I was extremely excited, immediately thinking of using Spring-Autumn Cicada in order to be reborn. I used Calamity Beckoning Gu to attract you to Water Pavilion. You refined 10% of Water Pavilion, that was something I purposely engineered to make you less alert. When you left, I activated Water Pavilion and hid in the sweat on your skin. But in this aspect, how did you confirm that Water Pavilion was on you from the start? Fang Yuan answered, this is not hard to guess. You have to ensure my safety, just your will alone is not enough, the rank 7 Immortal Gu House Water Pavilion is your strongest safeguard. Secondly, thinking will expend your thoughts, and cause your will to weaken. I made you exert yourself in creating the killer move, but you had never gone into a state of weakness. Next, you contested against Giant Sun's will in my mind, and even helped to refine the supreme true inheritance of True Yang building. Furthermore, you were under the light of wisdom, but I did not see your will weakening. The only explanation is Water Pavilion. Your will had always been obtaining replenishment. When I first inspected the goo worms that made up Water Pavilion, I did not realize it. The most crucial goo worm is that wisdom path Immortal Gu, delight in water and mountain goo, right? He, you are half right. Mo Yao's will confessed, delight in water and mountain goo can only create joyful will, but my will is not joyful will, thus I used other goo worms to convert the joyful will. This will of mine can indeed influence your thoughts, meddling with your lines of thinking and making you act differently to your nature. Am I right to say, you were purposely losing to Giant Sun's will? Fang Yuan laughed. Giant Sun's will is indeed strong, but the difference in our battle strengths would not be so absurdly large. When I awakened in shock, I realized that Water Pavilion had already turned into an armor around me, saving my life. At that moment I realized something was wrong. Although I was alert in the past, because of your influence, it gradually vanished. But although I found something amiss, I could not be sure of it. When Giant Sun's will attacked me in a frenzy, I guessed his tactic. This battlefield is only so big, there are very few outside elements that can influence the battle, why would I not be wary of the formless hands? Thus, I took a risk and went along with his ploy, purposely moving slowly so that the formless hand would attack me. In the end, I obtained proof of your ill intentions. Next, even though Water Pavilion broke apart, I was still afraid of its power. Thus, I coaxed you into entering my immortal aperture, and at the same time, using your goo worms for fighting. I purposely got hit by many killer moves, and most of the goo worms that I borrowed from you were sealed as a result. This was to prevent you from having any goo worms that did not need primeval essence to activate. Mo Yao's will heard this and shook her head, exclaiming, Fang Yuan, you are too shrewd, the moment you found something wrong, you schemed to this extent, your acting surpassed mine. But there is something I don't understand. Fang Yuan asked. Oh, what is that? Earlier, I lost fixed immortal travel Immortal Gu to a six-fingered formless hand. I know that fixed immortal travel is an Immortal Gu that you really wanted to get rid of, because it affected your plans too much. But how were you so sure that the six-fingered formless hand would take away fixed immortal travel, and not other Immortal Gu, least of all spring-autumn Cicada? Mo Yao's will laughed bitterly, lad, I am only a will left behind by the main body for 10,000 years, do you really think I can control the entire situation? Back then, the situation was so chaotic, and at the moment when the formless hand grabbed you, I hesitated, afraid to show Water Pavilion as it would attract your suspicion. But next, after it took fixed immortal travel, I was overjoyed, I quickly interfered with your thoughts, causing you to help Tai Bai Yunsheng. This delayed some time, and you lost fixed immortal travel. Fang Yuan stared blankly, your luck is very good. Mo Yao shook her head, bitterly smiling, back then, I sneaked into Truyang building and wanted to get my hands on fortune rivaling Heaven Gu, releasing it in the end. Since then, my luck had been terrible. Later, when I blocked the seven-fingered formless hand for you, my intention was to sacrifice the rank 7 calamity beckoning Gu in Water Pavilion, what a pity that the formless hand took the core, Water Harmony Immortal Gu. If your spring-autumn Cicada had a mortal's consciousness, I would have struck long ago. Unfortunately, your Gu Immortal will is still inside, and I did not dare to act rashly, only influencing you secretly. When I lurked in your mind, I had been paying attention to your thoughts and had been attempting to read your memories. But after fighting with Giant Sun's will, I could not split up, all of my will was used to manipulate Water Pavilion to protect your life. Otherwise, I would have noticed when you sensed something amiss. In fact, I would have interfered with your thoughts and made you dismiss this problem. Discover N. W. Chapt. R.S. NN0. E. L. by. .com. Moreover, I had little immortal essence left, most of it was used to create wills. Your tactic of consuming it was very effective, but if I had 5 or 6 more beads of red date immortal essence, the situation would have been very different. Fang Yuan nodded, sigh, actually, this was not a fair fight. A will alone cannot think as deeply as the main body. Especially when wills have their specialties and would act on those traits. A will is just a will, it cannot replace the main body. If your main body was dealing with me, I would have lost long ago. Fairy Emo Yao, you truly live up to your name. With just a will that you left behind, you could reach this stage. Fang Yuan sighed continuously. After revealing their cards, he instead started consoling Emo Yao's will, seemingly forgetting their status as enemies. It was as if he was Emo Yao's longtime friend. He continued to sigh, your plan was really too difficult, it is like walking on a tightrope, you had to be careful of the balance of the situation at all times. If when you schemed against me was prior to now, there was a chance I would have continued being fooled by you. Unfortunately, right before coming to Northern Plains, I made a similar mistake, and my decree in life is to never commit the same mistake twice. Saying so, the image of a young woman dressed in white appeared in Fang Yuan's mind. Actually, it is also thanks to Wisdom Gu's help. Even without using it personally, just by the light halo that it emitted, my thoughts became extremely sharp and I understood many things, thus being able to expose your scheme. As expected of a rank 9 Immortal Gu. After talking this much, I have a question to ask you, what type of will are you? Mo Yao chuckled, I might as well tell you now. Since you already know my methods, you'll get the answer sooner or later. In fact, under such circumstances, it is already too late even if you discover my true motive. There is no doubt you will need to use Spring-Autumn Cicada to self-detonate. My will is called Fake Will. Fake and true, truth and lies, fake will can disguise as a person's thoughts and collide with other thoughts, changing the results of their thinking and influencing a person's decisions and actions. Fang Yuan realized at once, no wonder I could not find where you were lurking when I checked in my mind. You were disguised as part of my thoughts. But you are wrong on one thing, I will not use Spring-Autumn Cicada. Are you sure? He. Mo Yao's will laughed, 6-arm Heavenly Zombie King was a killer move that I perfected with you. I purposely gave an incorrect estimation and caused your body to turn into a zombie, you no longer have any way to progress. At this point, you have no future. I have been around you for so long, I understand you well, you have no trump cards left. Right now, the wind veil of assimilation is closing in, and you have already lost fixed immortal travel, do you think you can open a Stargate here? Don't be unrealistic. You will be attacked by everyone, even though you purposely acted weaker, your real battle strength is still inferior to Giant Sun's will. After all, this is not the true inheritance secluded domain. Inside the true inheritance secluded domain, wills and thoughts are suppressed. As for worldly wave trace Immortal Gu, I am not going to lend it to you anymore. Moreover, other than Giant Sun's will, you still have a huge threat here, that is Hei Lou Lan with the great strength true martial physique. Rank 5 peak stage, think about the force of his self-detonation. Right now, you are only holding on because of the light of wisdom. With so many strong foes, you are at your wit's end. Mo Yao's will laughed for a while before her tone became calmer, you refuse to use Spring-Autumn Cicada because you are wary of your black coffin luck. You do not have to be so nervous. Spring-Autumn Cicada's drawback is that it will cause its owner's luck to become progressively worse. Back then, Red Lotus Demon Venerable was a victim of this. Luck is really strong and influential, no doubt, but it cannot decide everything, it depends on who is facing it. You had so much bad luck, yet with your strength and wisdom, you still managed to get this far. Ma Hongyun had so much good luck, yet he could not grasp it well, even though he escaped from this place, he would surely fall into the hands of Northern Plains Gu immortals and become a captive. Fang Yuan snickered, you've schemed for this long, I'm sure you've made ample preparations, you have the confidence of certain victory. A contest of wills is not my forte, if I self-detonate, that is using my weakness to fight my enemy's strength, how can I be so stupid? Mo Yao also laughed, to think that you'd have such a timid side. It is a pity, but you are not entirely right. I do intend on using the spring-autumn cicada, but it is impossible with your foundation to travel 10,000 years back in time. I plan to find Red Lotus Demon Venerable's inheritance when traveling upstream in the river of time. Using the power of the inheritance, I would go back to traveling against the current, 10,000 years into the past. He, don't you want to see what Red Lotus Demon Venerable's inheritance looks like? Mo Yao said something shocking. She actually knew of Red Lotus Demon Venerable's secret inheritance ground. But Fang Yuan gave no response, he was silent. Outside, giant suns will finally counted down from 10 to 1. It seems you are still very stubborn, you want to resist to the end. Seeing that Fang Yuan did not surrender, giant suns will said this in a deep and low tone. This demon deserves nothing less than death. Ancestor Giant Sun had granted him mercy, giving him a chance to turn over a new leaf, yet he is still refusing to change. Yi Lui Sang shouted, yet in the depths of his heart he felt eased. Kill this demon. Cut his head off and make it our urine flask. Today, we will exterminate a menace of society. Everyone was riled up. Oh no, the wind veil of assimilation is already within 100 steps of us. Ancestor Giant Sun, what will we do? Someone said in shock. Wisdom Gu was maintaining a halo of light to protect itself. The Gu masters were all standing near its edge and outside of it, only Fang Yuan was inside. As the wind veil of assimilation grew closer, it shrunk the space that was inside, and in just a short period of time, the wind veil would reach the surface of the light halo. Chapter 646, Road of Life. The wind veil of assimilation was constantly getting closer, that was why giant suns will try to get Fang Yuan to surrender. If Fang Yuan surrendered and returned giant sun's immortal essence, everything would be easy to settle. But if Fang Yuan was adamant and refused to surrender, giant suns would have to fight him to the death. Hei Lou Lan, I am giving you this strength path Immortal Gu, release your dark limit seal and display the true might of one of the 10 extreme physiques. Your great strength true martial physique has the highest recovery speed in the world, it greatly surpasses the other 9 extreme physiques. Don't worry, even if you self-detonate, I have my ways to save you. Giant Suns will said, handing Hei Lou Lan a strength path Immortal Gu. Obtaining the Immortal Gu that he had been dreaming of, Hei Lou Lan was unable to conceal his excitement. Thank you Lord Ancestor. At the same time, Giant Suns will promise the other Gu masters many benefits, handing out Gu worms one by one. Giant Suns will raise the morale. This scoundrel has committed many evil deeds, you will all be great heroes renowned in Northern Plains after eliminating him. Your act of bringing peace to the people will make sure you are well respected wherever you go. We know that being basked in the light of wisdom would reduce lifespan. But in this situation, if we continue delaying it, we will be killed by the wind veil of assimilation. How can losing a bit of lifespan compare to death? Furthermore, you just need to restrain him, I will strike and deal the finishing blow. Everyone looked at each other. Giant Suns will had incomparable reputation, he was left behind by the old ancestor, under benefits and reputation, forced by the situation, everyone summoned their courage and looked at Fang Yuan, ready to strike. Strange, why isn't he dead yet? After being in the light for so long, he should have expended all his lifespan already. Suddenly, someone asked this. Because if Fang Yuan was dead, they would not need to take a risk. That is because he is already dead. After completely becoming a zombie monster, he is among the living dead. The dead have no lifespan, no matter how long he stays there, he would not die of old age. Hei Lou Lan explained, destroying their fantasies. So that's it. Everyone was taken aback, they finally understood that this fight was unavoidable. The air seemed to turn frigid, the Gu masters' killing intent surged, without doubt, this was the final battle. They had great confidence in killing Fang Yuan. After all, there was the great strength, true martial physique as well as giant sun's will. However, they were still nervous. Fang Yuan's terrifying battle strength was ingrained into their hearts. Of course we have to kill this demon, but there are bound to be casualties in battle, O great longevity heaven, please don't let it be me. Those were the inner thoughts of everyone. The atmosphere was getting more solemn, the battle was going to commence. But right at this moment, there was another surprising twist. Wisdom Gu suddenly stopped sending out the light of wisdom, and flew into the sea of Gu worms. Earlier, it had displayed its rank 9 aura at full force, but now it had completely concealed itself, hiding with the Gu worm group. It quickly vanished. Everyone was shocked. Giant Sun's will was the first to react, laughing heartily, excellent. This Wisdom Gu's wild will is a newborn, it is still very immature. Earlier, it created the halo to prevent other lifeforms from getting near it, but now that it sensed the battle was near, in order to avoid getting dragged into this, it escaped first. Everyone was overjoyed at this, there was no better situation. Without Wisdom Gu's halo causing trouble, Giant Sun's will could enter battle directly. Demon, the Wisdom Gu that you entrusted your life to has run away. Your time of death is now, come and receive your death. Demon, you have committed many heinous sins, landing in this situation today, you are dead meat. Everyone shouted, their morale surging. Giant Sun's will was ready to strike. Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. Fang Yuan broke the silence, he raised his head and laughed. His laughter boomed over the surroundings, giving off a wild aura, he suppressed all other voices. He had a green face with sharp fangs, and his eyes were shining with a ruthless light. Although his recovery ability was strong, his previous injuries were too severe, his body was still in bad shape. He was left with one arm, his body was crooked, yet his imposing attitude burst out, causing everyone to take a slight step back. Damned demon, still being arrogant before your death. What are you laughing for? Hei Lou Lan took a big step forward, his body was like a bear, he stared with his eyes opened wide, demon, committing evil acts will lead to your own doom, you have no way out but death. Fang Yuan, I had already given you your only chance of surrender, but you did not grab onto it. Now, there is no way out for you anymore. Giant Sun's will shouted resolutely. Mo Yao's will also said, lad, no need to continue acting secretive. Your fake imposing aura cannot stop them. Don't you want to see Red Lotus Demon Venerable's secret inheritance ground? The battle is going to commence, if your mind becomes muddled against Giant Sun's will, I will not be able to save you again. Give up, this is a dead end, there is no way out. Quickly use the spring-autumn cicada. Fang Yuan's laughter ended, his voice was coarse, isn't there a saying, heaven will always leave a path for you, as long as I want to walk, there will be a road for me to step on. Everyone was shocked, these words were very familiar, thinking about it, they realized it was from The Legends of Ren Zu. The Legends of Ren Zu Chapter 3, Section 3 states. Luo Pavilion was a very wide and complex labyrinth. Ren Zu searched for Northern Dark-Eye's soul, who was missing, but he got lost in the labyrinth himself, even after several days, he did not find a way out. He was extremely tired, he had sprawled on the ground, his back leaning against the walls of the labyrinth. RE. Add updated ST. Rise at n/vel/bin.com. A feeling of boundless loneliness quickly engulfed him. This was because he had given his original heart to hope, right now, he only had a heart of loneliness left. The feeling of loneliness was unbearable, Ren Zu was afraid of being lonely, he had once dug out both of his eyes and turned them into a son and daughter to accompany him. But right now, he could only endure the torture of loneliness. Amidst the loneliness, Ren Zu felt intense desolation, loss, and pain. Time seemed to have stopped, he was all alone in this world, there was nobody he could rely on, there was no fire that he could gain warmth from. Ren Zu felt suffocation, but as time passed, he got used to the feeling of loneliness, he even started to savor it. He started to feel that loneliness was not that scary. In his loneliness, he felt serenity, peace, and quiet. He talked to himself, "O human, what is the purpose of your existence? Struggling here in this world, rushing about everywhere." Next, he heard a voice from beside him, "O human, you are the spirit of all beings. You are lonely, thus you wanted to be comforted, to be understood, to be recognized. Right now, the thing you want to do most is to find the way out of this damned place." Ren Zu was shocked. Who is talking to me?" That voice laughed as it said, "I am a Gu, called Self. If you look inside yourself, you will find me." Ren Zu quickly inspected his heart of loneliness. As expected, in the deepest part of his heart, he saw a Gu worm. This Gu looked very real, almost like himself, but it was many times smaller than him, like the size of an ant. Ren Zu was curious. You are a Gu worm, why are you inside my body?" Self Gu said, "Ever since you gained life, I had been inside your body, you just did not discover me. It is not easy to find me, you will need to inspect your inner heart of loneliness." "Is that so?" Ren Zu had little interest, he was quite indifferent about this as his mind was entirely concerned with Northern Dark Ice Soul. Self Gu saw Ren Zu's lack of concern and laughed, "Oh Ren Zu, you should be happy. You should know, finding yourself and understanding yourself, that is the most important thing in life. You yourself are the most reliable thing in the world, let me help you leave this place." "You can help me leave this place?" "No way, can you bring me out of Luo Pavilion, and travel in the reverse flow river?" Ren Zu was shocked and excited. Self Gu laughed heartily, "Oh Ren Zu, why must you walk on this road? The door of life and death's entrance and exit are the traces left behind by Fate Gu when it visited Fairness Gu. When you walk on this road, you will be under the manipulation and arrangement of fate. If you want to revive, to leave this place, you should walk on a brand new road." Ren Zu was perplexed, "Isn't there only one road? Wisdom Gu had already told me that, where can there be a second road?" Self Gu said, "Oh Ren Zu, as long as you want to walk, there will be a road for you to step on." Ren Zu was even more confused now. Then how should I walk? Self Gu said, "Didn't I say it already? First, you have to think about leaving." Think? Ren Zu tried using his brain, thinking of how to move on. He thought for half a day, his head was bursting, when finally, a Gu jumped out of his mind. This Gu was an old friend of Ren Zu, it was Cognition Gu. "Where there is cognition, there is me." Cognition Gu said, "Oh human, you seem to have gotten into trouble again, let me help you think." Saying so, Cognition Gu gave off a bright light, enlightening Ren Zu. Cognition Gu had an ability, that was to enlighten all beings. Any life form enlightened by Cognition Gu would gain wings. Back then, Verdant Great Sun obtained the wings of Self, flying into the sky. When the light dispersed, Ren Zu obtained a pair of wings. This pair of wings was located at his heels, they were very delicate. Cognition noted, this pair of wings is called independence, Ren Zu, it will help you walk on a new road. You have to be careful, a new road is hard to walk on, other Gu are unreliable, you can only rely on yourself Gu." Saying so, Cognition Gu vanished. Ren Zu was still very much confused, how should I walk? Walk ahead, and carve the path of your road of life. This is a road that is unique to yourself. Only you can walk on it. Self Gu said excitedly. Ren Zu took the first step forward. Bam! The next moment, his vision changed. Everyone heard Fang Yuan and reacted, flying into a rage. "This demon has lost his mind. Kill, we have to work together and kill him. He, how dare you compare yourself to Ren Zu? Go ahead and walk, let me see what road you can walk on." Everyone lost their patience, they shouted as they charged towards Fang Yuan. Guh. At this moment, Hei Lou Lan suddenly showed a pained expression, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Good timing. Fang Yuan smiled, showing an eerie aura. He raised his remaining hand as he punched directly. Bam! With a loud explosion, Fist Chi burst out as a strength path phantom materialized in the air. Chapter 647, The Answer is Found in Oneself. This strength path phantom had a striking resemblance to a youthful Fang Yuan. Vivid and lifelike, and generally in the same dimensions. It obstructed the charge of the Gu masters by itself, appearing lonely and insignificant. Isn't this that lad Hei Lou Lan's killer move? Mo Yao's Will was surprised. Ah, I remember now, you seized his crucial Gu worm, but how did you reproduce his killer move? While she was speaking, the Gu masters had already reached the strength path phantom. Fang Yuan's strength path phantom could only endure 3 moves before it was torn to pieces. The remaining Fist Chi was condensing again, but was extinguished by Yi Lui Sang's fire. This demon is a paper tiger, no need to be afraid. Humph, the method he is relying on now was merely stolen from Lord Hei Lou Lan. This strength path phantom has the form but at most only has half the strength of Lord Hei Lou Lan's killer move, what's there to be afraid of? The group's morale soared higher, they paused for a moment before moving towards Fang Yuan at an even faster speed. Only Hei Lou Lan had a bewildered expression and slightly decreased his speed, staying at the rear. Did he use my vital Gu to create this strength path phantom? How could this strength path phantom actually have his own actual appearance? Although his vital Gu had been seized, his injuries had rapidly recovered. Great strength true martial physique's recovery ability was at the top of the 10 extreme physiques, tens of times stronger than 6-arm heavenly zombie king. It was not strange for Fang Yuan to forcibly refine Hei Lou Lan's vital Gu. Fang Yuan was already a Gu immortal and with the help of immortal essence, this meant an enormous advantage in refining mortal Gu. Fang Yuan's strength path phantom actually had the same appearance as him, this was what made Hei Lou Lan extremely surprised. Even if you seized Hei Lou Lan's Gu and roughly reconstructed his killer move, your strength path phantom merely has its form and it might have the ability to recondense from the Fist Chi, but the difference when compared to Hei Lou Lan's genuine killer move is too great. Mo Yao's Will bluntly commented. At this moment, everyone had reached Fang Yuan. On the outer periphery, giant Sun's Will had curled up into a ball, moving slowly, waiting for the time Fang Yuan showed a weakness during the chaotic battle to deal a fatal strike. In that case Mo Yao, open your eyes and watch what happens next closely. Fang Yuan's grin slowly turned into a huge smile. He punched. With the only remaining arm. Fist Chi surged and turned into a strength path phantom. The phantom did not pause, immediately pouncing towards the incoming Gu masters. Fang Yuan punched again. Another strength path phantom appeared, but it was different. This strength path phantom also resembled a young Fang Yuan, but it had 2 extra arms and it was even more powerful. Fang Yuan's breathing sped up as he punched rapidly, the fist shadows interweaving together into a curtain. Boom boom boom. Punches after punches in the air sent out cracking noises, producing continuous echoing explosions. Majestic Fist Chi surged madly, forming whirlwinds. Wind and clouds surged and roared like dragons and tigers. In a blink of an eye, 100 strength path phantoms were created, forming layers upon layers of protection around Fang Yuan. The Gu masters had just finished off the previous 2 strength path phantoms and were about to charge towards Fang Yuan. But when they raised their heads, all of their expressions turned into great shock. How could there be so many strength path phantoms? One Gu master's eyes almost popped out. F*CK, there are still more being created. Another Gu master swore loudly. Fang Yuan continued to punch, Fist Chi formed into strength path phantoms as if they were endless. The Gu masters could not believe what they were seeing. This number greatly surpassed Hei Lou Lan's limit, moreover it was still rapidly increasing. Within moments, there were already 1,000 strength path phantoms. Just recently, Fang Yuan was alone, but now he had an army standing around him. Are they phonies? A Gu master was suspicious and felt Fang Yuan was using Gu worm to create illusions. But the strength path phantom's solid attacks in the next moment gave a painful answer to the group. Kill. We will let you taste our power. These strength path phantoms were actually able to speak, and showed extraordinary intelligence. They attacked together, forming an endless stream of humans. The Gu masters who were confident in their numbers were now drowned in strength path phantoms. They seemed to be stranded in a torrential river, suffering the strong attacks of the waves. Defend. Stabilize our formation, they are only strength path phantoms. Damn it, these strength path phantoms can actually coordinate and carry out battle tactics. The Gu masters shouted one after another. Their formation was like a large reef near the shore. However, after engaging in battle, they discovered that the power of these strength path phantoms far surpassed their imaginations. These strength path phantoms coordinated together and did not care about sacrificing themselves. Although they only had singular method of attacking, it generated an extremely large pressure on the Gu masters. The Gu masters' formation soon showed signs of breaking. What killer move is this? My strength path phantoms could not coordinate to this extent. This is simply a relentless army fighting to the death. Hei Lou Lan was shocked and uneasy. Fang Yuan retreated while continuing to punch out fist chi. The number of strength path phantoms continued to rise crazily. Your killer move, this killer move. Mo Yao's will stammered in shock. She analyzed, Mortal Gu absolutely cannot have such might, you definitely used Immortal Gu. You still have a trump card that I don't know about. No, impossible, you definitely had refined Immortal Gu. How could you refine Immortal Gu so quickly? Fang Yuan laughed loudly. Why do you think I tried to get near to Wisdom Gu by all means possible? It was to use its rank 9 aura to help me refine Immortal Gu. If it were other people's Immortal Gu, it would not be easy to deceive, thus I could not refine man as before and landscape as before. But it is very difficult for young Wild Will to distinguish if this aura originated from me. Gu worms higher by 2 ranks or more could pressure others into submission. Back then on Qing Mao Mountain, Fang Yuan used Spring-Autumn Cicada's aura to help him refine Gu. That means you had planned to intentionally transform completely with 6-armed Heavenly Zombie King? Mo Yao's will immediately started feeling uneasy when she discovered this. The light of wisdom consumed lifespan, but after transforming into a zombie which was already dead, Fang Yuan naturally could stay for much longer in the light of wisdom. Mo Yao continued to observe and found that Fang Yuan's killer move followed some certain characteristics of strength path. His strength path phantoms normally had 2 arms. But sometimes, there would be phantoms with 4 arms and even 6 arms occasionally. The more arms the phantoms had, the stronger they were. 2 armed phantoms only had average battle strength comparable to 100 Beast Kings. 4 armed phantoms were comparable to 1,000 Beast Kings and 6 armed phantoms were comparable to myriad Beast Kings. This is simply the recreation of a beast group. When Mo Yao's will became aware of this, her delicate body shivered, and said with an incredulous tone, lad you actually managed to resolve the age-old question, you have merged the 2 paths of enslavement and strength. Enslavement path controlled a great number of beasts and used numbers to crush enemies. Strength path focused on strengthening oneself, fighting many enemies alone. The essence of 2 Gu master paths that were polar opposites were now perfectly harmonized and united in Fang Yuan's killer move. Fang Yuan had been trying to solve this issue since long ago. But he made no progress and was even ridiculed and persuaded against by Mo Yao's will. However, he had never given up on his attempts to resolve this. He would never abandon something because of other people's denial, ridicule and persuasion. The most crucial breakthrough came during the process of Gu Immortal advancement. He used this extremely precious opportunity to advance his strength path realm. Obtaining inspiration from heaven and earth, he abandoned everything else to wholeheartedly seek the answer for the merging of enslavement and strength path. Heaven and earth were completely open to him, he was imparted supreme mysteries. But finally, he also had Wisdom Gu to thank. Fang Yuan stayed under the light of wisdom for a long time, wasting away his lifespan and turning into one of the living dead. He paid a heavy price, but his rewards were also enormous. Finally, he was able to use his available Gu worms to coordinate together and form the killer move. Without investment, how could there be any gains? Of course, he also had to thank Hei Lou Lan, thanks to his vital Gu, which was one of the most crucial components of the killer move. Besides it, there were Immortal Gu, as well as many Gu worms which were required to form 6-arm Heavenly Zombie King, and in addition Fang Yuan's second vital Gu, all-out effort Gu, which played an important role. This was also one of the reasons Fang Yuan intentionally transformed with 6-arm Heavenly Zombie King. He needed the Gu worms forming 6-arm Heavenly Zombie King to make this new killer move. Even if the black coffin luck on him intensified, even if powerful enemies surrounded him and the wind veil of assimilation isolated everything from the world, heaven would never seal all of one's paths. There was no absolutely desperate situation in this world, there were only people who despair. The answer to resolving problems will always be in our own hands. When we inspect our inner hearts, we will find that the miraculous heavenly power was in ourselves all along. To discover oneself, to recognize oneself, and to rely on oneself. The convergence of enslavement and strength path is an age-old question which has baffled countless heroes and geniuses through the ages. I had never expected it to be perfectly resolved in your hands. Lad, you have ventured on a new road indeed. As you continue to develop this path, you might even be able to truly unite enslavement and strength path, and develop a whole new path. This path will definitely have unprecedented strength. Mo Yao's will side with deep emotions, her refinement path grandmaster spirit made her not stint on praising Fang Yuan. He. Fang Yuan was just about to reply when suddenly giant suns will appeared right in front of him. It was a sneak attack. During this critical moment of life and death, Fang Yuan moved his head, his vital area, and used his shoulder to bear the brunt of Giant Sun's will's attack. Boom, a huge sound erupted, Fang Yuan was sent rolling to the ground, plowing a gorge meters in length. Looks like there is still quite a bit of your will remaining in my mind, you influenced my thoughts again. Fang Yuan was furious as he saw through Mo Yao's scheme. Mo Yao shed all consideration for face and screamed, "Kid, I asked you to obediently activate Spring-Autumn Cicada, but you didn't give in. Destiny sent you in front of me to give me a chance at rebirth. I will definitely grasp this opportunity." Humph. Most of your will and Gu worms have been locked in my immortal aperture. Your red date immortal essence is also under my control, you have no way to replenish your will anymore. To influence my thoughts, your thoughts will have to collide, let me see how long this portion of your will that is hiding in my mind can last. Fang Yuan attacked Mo Yao's will while tightly fixing his gaze on Giant Sun's will. Strength path phantoms soon gathered around him and filled the gap, once more tightly protecting Fang Yuan. Giant Sun's will felt quite troubled, it was okay when Fang Yuan was alone previously, but now he had so many helpers. Giant Sun's will excelled in speed and transforming, but was afraid of expending his thoughts. Fang Yuan's killer move that combined enslavement and strength path was a direct counter to him. No matter how fast your speed is, I will form a tighter defense. You have your countless transformations, I have my self-detonating phantoms. You. Ovals upt. Tes on NOV slash L slash B I .com. There were way too many strength path phantoms. They surrounded Fang Yuan in layers after layers, not only in all directions, there were strength path phantoms even floating in the sky. There was simply no gap to attack. This killer move actually combined the essence of both enslavement and strength path. These strength path phantoms can not only condense back from the remnant fist chi, they can even self-detonate. This kid definitely already had some foundation in this aspect and had made preparations, otherwise just relying on the time within the light of wisdom, he absolutely would not be able to create it out of nothing. Right, he succeeded in his Gu Immortal ascension, it is extremely likely that he received the guidance of heaven and earth during the process of advancement. Damn it! Giant Sons Will pondered intensely before hurriedly stopping his thoughts. There were hardly any left. If he thought for too long, a large portion of him would vanish. A chance. Suddenly, he transformed into a golden rainbow, traveling nimbly between the army of strength path phantoms and ruthlessly striking at Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan grinned, "Old geezer, why are you in such a rush?" He had intentionally revealed this flaw in the strength path phantoms formation. Giant Sons Will fell for Fang Yuan's scheme. 3 strength path phantoms instantly appeared in front of him. Giant Sons Will thought rapidly and like a snake, he coiled around 2. However, he could not avoid the last strength path phantom, and directly smashed into it. Boom! A huge sound erupted, the strength path phantom was crushed into smithereens. Old bastard, do you really think I am easy prey? Humph, I have already waited for too long. Fang Yuan was already fully prepared. He raised his fist and pounded down with all his strength at Giant Sons Will. Giant Sons Will was caught unprepared and shattered. Chapter 648, Fierce and Ambitious. Fang Yuan finally displayed his true strength, his punch was extremely fast, Giant Sons Will was caught unprepared and received the full brunt of the attack. Bang, the condensed golden wool was smashed into smithereens, splitting into countless parts. But in the next moment, the will condensed again, though its volume had fully decreased by 1/5. Having suffered such a great loss, Giant Sons Will was about to furiously counterattack. However, Fang Yuan had already retreated to safety behind the layers upon layers of strength path phantoms. Giant Sons Will was so angry at this that he almost collapsed again. He could not think about too many things, otherwise he would have already seen this was a trap. Thus, he fell for Fang Yuan's scheme. Hei Lou Lan, what are you still hesitating for? Giant Sons Will bellowed. How can he send out strength path phantoms that look exactly the same as him? Hei Lou Lan's thoughts were tangled and confused, and when he heard Giant Sons Will's roar, he quivered before coming back to his senses. Fang Yuan's killer move was powerful and had the number advantage, suppressing everyone into such disadvantage that they were not even able to raise their heads. Even Giant Sons Will could not make any progress. This was the moment of life and death. Hei Lou Lan's great strength true martial physique was the crucial battle strength that could change the situation. As he thought of this, Hei Lou Lan opened his eyes wide in anger and stood up straight. Boom! One ordinary punch produced a terrifying result, the piercingly cold fist chi almost penetrated the heavy layers of strength path phantoms. Human figures flew all around as the phantoms were smashed to pieces. This was the true strength of great strength true martial physique. At this moment, Hei Lou Lan displayed all his strength without any reservations. The Immortal Gu Dark Limit's remaining power on him was a thin layer of black membrane. When Hei Lou Lan tore apart this layer of black membrane, his figure suddenly changed. The surging aura of one of the 10 extreme physiques soared to the skies, a formless aura shook the air and formed a shockwave that engulfed the surroundings. This? What's going on? Lord Hei Lou Lan actually turned into a woman. The rumor was actually true. In Su Xian's night elopement, Su Xian had given birth to a daughter with Hei tribe's supreme elder, Hei Cheng. It was no wonder that back then, Giant Sons Will had chosen Hei Lou Lan and Ma Hongyun to be Frost Jade Peacock's masters. Giant Sons Will had already seen through Hei Lou Lan's true gender. Hei Lou Lan turned a deaf ear to everyone's shocked remarks, and fixed her gaze at Fang Yuan. Killing intent surged in a wild, noble aura manifested like a proud tigress starting her hunt, bold and fearless, and hungry to devour humans. Fang Yuan gave a cold snort, fist chi surged beside him non-stop, condensing into strength path phantoms that had the formation of an army. He had full confidence in his killer move and was not afraid of Hei Lou Lan. The self-detonation of one of the 10 extreme physiques can indeed slaughter immortals. But my killer move can also do so. Strength path phantoms shouted one after another, their rallying cries poured like a river towards Hei Lou Lan. Hei Lou Lan, who had exposed her true appearance, was simply unstoppable. She was like a female warrior goddess who possessed the strength of 1,000 troops. The strength path phantom army charged at her, but she was stable and unmoved. Save me! At another side, Yi Lui sang and the others cried out for help. Fang Yuan was concentrating on 3 tasks, facing Hei Lou Lan, taking care of other Gu masters and also guarding against Giant Sun's will. He displayed his master-level attainment in enslavement path for all to see. The strength path phantom army were highly coordinated and they seemed to move like one entity. With no regard for sacrifices, they attacked with a crazy offense. Yi Lui sang and the others were already in danger, but now could hold on no longer. Their final defensive line was broken. Hei Lou Lan wanted to return and assist them, but was firmly stalled by the strength path phantoms. These strength path phantoms actually have an ordinary person's intelligence. How was he able to accomplish this? He definitely seized my vital Gu, but how could he create strength path phantoms that have the exact same appearance as him? Hei Lou Lan was extremely astonished. The more she battled with the strength path phantom army, the more she realized their power. An individual strength path phantom was of no concern. But 3 strength path phantoms' tacit cooperation could slightly resist Hei Lou Lan. 6 strength path phantoms could form a small battle formation and stall her. 9 strength path phantoms attacking in succession could pressure her. The greater the number of strength path phantoms, the higher their battle strength. This was all because of the exquisite coordination between them. Even beast groups could not accomplish this, but Fang Yuan's enslavement path army was actually made of his own strength path phantoms. They came from the same source and thus were of one mind. Hei Lou Lan was not able to reinforce them in time. Yi Lui sang and the others were killed one after the other by the strength path phantoms. And facing the cries for help from his bloodline descendants, Giant Sons Will made the opposite choice of Hei Lou Lan. He turned into several arrows and tried to take advantage of the chaos to kill Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan mobilized the guards beside him to engage in an intense battle with Giant Sun's will. The duration of the battle was extremely short, but it was exceptionally fierce. Seeing that he could not succeed, Giant Sons Will left after probing and did not continue fighting zealously. There were hardly any thoughts left in this will. The intense battle would demand quick thinking and he would slowly be unable to bear such intensive consumption. And Fang Yuan also was in trouble. Mo Yao's will continued to bother him from time to time, creating distracting thoughts and causing him to repeatedly make mistakes when mobilizing the strength path phantoms, making him unable to display his master-level enslavement path attainment to the fullest. However, as time passed, Fang Yuan gradually attained the upper hand. His strength path phantom army continued to increase in numbers. The narrow remaining space was filled with these strength path phantoms, their number already surpassing 10,000. At the same time, Mo Yao's will's influence on him was weakening. Giant Sons Will sneak attacked many times but did not succeed. His remaining volume was less than that of an adult. The only one who was still fighting like an addict, Hei Lou Lan, was a monster with unlimited stamina. Great strength, true martial physique's battle strength could make one speechless. If not for the layers of strength path phantoms which consisted of an absurd number already, they might not have been able to restrain her. Child, you have to be careful. I researched this strength path killer move for you, although it is strong, it has a flaw. The strength path phantom you create is actually your subconscious image. Her mother, Su Xian, said in an extremely weak tone at the moment of her death, advising her repeatedly with a worried expression. Hei Lou Lan sat at the side of the bed, grabbing her hand, nodding her head as she wept without letting out a noise. The legends of Ren Zu has already told us that every person has a self in their hearts. Child, your strength path phantom is the self in your heart. What I can see from it is that you thirst for tyrannical strength, you long to escape from a woman's status and have it become that of a man's. Use this killer move as few times as possible, be careful as the killer move might imperceptibly influence you to become as savage as your strength path phantom in the end. Su Xian continued to mumble, almost exhausting all of her energy. Visit N0VL/BIN for the best novel reading experience. Mother, I understand, you can be at ease. Bean-sized tears trickled down Hei Lou Lan's cheeks. When one day, you can create strength path phantoms that resemble your appearance completely, Mother will be at ease. Remember, find yourself. Also, be careful of your father. Su Xian finished her last words, using up her final breath as she left this world. Mother. Hei Lou Lan's heartbroken scream echoed in the room. Hei Lou Lan, what are you doing? You are actually letting your thoughts wander at this moment. Giant Sun's Will's furious shout broke Hei Lou Lan's recollection. Hei Lou Lan was startled to awareness, she then stared at Fang Yuan, her heart filled with extremely complicated emotions. This guy actually had already found his self. How did he accomplish it? The final moment is arriving, the wind veil of assimilation is already close to us. Hei Lou Lan, self-detonate, I swear upon the honor of Giant Sun that I will save you. Giant Suns will command it. Fang Yuan's gaze became sharp, he might have the Phantom Army's protection and was sure they could create enough time for him to open a Stargate, but he was not willing to take the risk. He quickly provoked, Hei Lou Lan, you are a hero of a generation. Giant Suns will might have Immortal Gu, but his immortal essence is still with me, how could he save you? How about you surrender to me, I have a way to escape this wind veil of assimilation. Fang Yuan was only probing and did not hold high hopes for it. But Hei Lou Lan's movement slowed down and her battle intent clearly lowered when she heard his words. Giant Suns will saw the situation taking a turn for the worse and quickly shouted, don't listen to this demon's nonsense, he cannot be trusted. Hei Lou Lan, don't hesitate, this is our final chance to turn around the situation. Could it be that you don't believe me, your ancestor? Don't forget that I am only lending you the strength path Immortal Gu, it still has my will and it will self-detonate with just a thought from me. Hei Lou Lan roared as her battle intent soared again. Demon, you have a glib tongue, crafty as a fox. Damn it, what Gu did you use on me? I will make you pay the most terrible price, hand over your life. Hei Lou Lan erupted and like a wild dragon entering the sea, she carved out a path through the layers of the strength path Phantom Army. Fang Yuan laughed loudly, good, let me personally experience the power of great strength true martial physique. He then faced Hei Lou Lan head-on, and engaged in close combat. Six-arm Heavenly Zombie King was strong but it was not the match of the 10 extreme physiques. This was still the case under the circumstances in which Fang Yuan possessed unlimited primeval essence and was activating large numbers of mortal Gu. Hei Lou Lan's feelings were much different. Fang Yuan's power and ferociousness along with the surrounding strength path phantom's tacit coordination made her feel extremely pressured, and she was suffering injuries after injuries. But great strength true martial physique's recovery ability was much stronger than six-arm heavenly zombie king. The pain instead caused Hei Lou Lan to become even more fierce. For a moment, both sides exchanged moves after moves and were evenly matched. Giant Sun's will only had to wait for a short while before it saw a flaw from Fang Yuan and sneak attacked at lightning speed. Fang Yuan retreated a step and turned around, counterattacking with clear hatred at Giant Sun's will. Giant Sun's will gnashed his teeth as he fiercely clashed with Fang Yuan, creating an even bigger flaw. He bellowed, "Hei Lou Lan." As long as this exposed flaw was used, Hei Lou Lan could definitely inflict heavy injuries upon Fang Yuan and might even be able to take his life. Giant Sun's will finally saw hope at this moment. Coming. Hei Lou Lan charged over and activated her Gu worms, striking with an unprecedented power. A dozen strength path phantoms suddenly jumped beside Fang Yuan to protect him. You! Giant Sun's will roared in shock. Hei Lou Lan's attack did not strike Fang Yuan, but smashed upon him. Giant Sun's will crumbled, revealing 3 Immortal Gu. Hei Lou Lan opened her mouth, actually swallowing the 3 Immortal Gu. With a gulp, the 3 Immortal Gu entered her stomach. Fang Yuan laughed loudly. The dozen strength path phantoms that had come to reinforce him changed their formation and surrounded Giant Sun's will, before brazenly self-detonating. Fist Chi surged, almost completely exterminating all of Giant Sun's will. Only 4 to 5 traces of golden thoughts managed to escape. Chapter 649, Twin Demons. Why? The golden thoughts were furious and puzzled by the betrayal. Humph. Old bastard, I followed your commands earlier because I needed something. Now that the strength path Immortal Gu is already in my possession, why would I still listen to your commands? Hei Lou Lan sneered, her beautiful appearance filled with pride and coldness. You thankless wretch, unfilial descendant, you actually betrayed your ancestor. The golden thoughts shouted in hatred. Shut up, stop screaming. Is it because your thoughts are too few now that you are unable to think and have become so demented? Hei Lou Lan crossed her arms and squinted her eyes. You want me to self-detonate, but after making that kind of promise, what can you actually use to save me? Relying on your slavery Gu, divert disaster Gu or fixed immortal travel. These are the only 3 remaining Immortal Gu on you. Now tell me, where is the Immortal Gu that can resurrect me? Humph, you want to deceive me with such a childish trick? If you were strong and powerful, I would obey you according to the rule of complying to the strong. But look at you now, what reason do you have to order me around? Just because you are the remaining will left behind by a dead man. He, even if it is Giant Sun Immortal Venerable, he is already dead, he is a thing of the past. This is a new era, why is a dead man like you still jumping around like a clown? Her words were filled with ambitious and ruthless grandeur. Hei Lou Lan was still that Hei Lou Lan. Even if I only have a single thought remaining, I can still cause the Immortal Gu to perish. The golden thoughts cried out. However, Hei Lou Lan was calm. You can try as much as you want. What's going on? You are actually suppressing 4 Immortal Gu. You might have great strength true martial physique, but you don't have the will of an immortal. How can you suppress 4 Immortal Gu? The golden thoughts flashed with radiance before screaming out in an incredulous tone. Clearly, it was unable to destroy the Immortal Gu. There are still many things you do not know. Hei Lou Lan seemed to be shrouded in profound mystery at this moment. Hei Lou Lan, as a descendant of Huang Jin bloodline and a tribe leader of a super tribe, you colluded with an outsider to scheme against your ancestor. You 2 shameless bastards, when did you team up? Why didn't I discover it? The golden thoughts asked in a furious tone. Sure enough, you are much easier to deal with when you can't think. Sigh, your pathetic performance really brings shame to Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's reputation. Fang Yuan sighed, but there was a grin on his face filled with disdain. The two had actually allied just before now. Earlier, Hei Lou Lan had shouted, "Demon, you have a glib tongue, crafty as a fox. Damn it, what gu did you use on me? I will make you pay the most terrible price, hand over your life." Fang Yuan had not used any gu, but Hei Lou Lan said Fang Yuan used a gu. This was a code word. Vischten. Velben. C. M for new updates. Whether it was Fang Yuan or Hei Lou Lan, both were meticulous and suspicious, merciless and formidable characters. They had cooperated together throughout the imperial court contest and had great understanding of each other. Both knew how ambitious the other was and would not resign to being under someone else. Just because of this, Fang Yuan was willing to take a gamble. Anyway, with the Strength Path Phantom's protection, the risk was not high. The two swindlers cooperated together. Hei Lou Lan made use of an opportunity in battle and succeeded in attacking Giant Sun's will and seizing away all the Immortal Gu. I am unresigned, I am unresigned. I am the strongest, yet I was plotted against till I reached this stage. None of you will have a good end. My main body left behind many arrangements which are set to activate and 88 Truyang building collapses. Truyang building will be rebuilt, and you guys will be hunted down to the ends of the world. I didn't lose to you. If I didn't make moves against Ma Hongyun and ruin my luck, how could I lose? In the end, I lost to luck. The golden thoughts roared hysterically. Boom boom boom. In the next moment, it self-detonated, destroying itself. It was after all something left behind by Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. Even if there were only a few thoughts left, it was decisive. It was worried the secrets on it would be searched and extracted. The situation was hopeless, so it directly chose to self-detonate. The self-detonation of thoughts was extremely fast. Even if Fang Yuan wanted to stop it, he did not have corresponding methods. Unlike Blood Path, Strength Path and Enslavement Path, his Wisdom Path attainment was still very shallow. Only by deceiving Giant Sun's will to enter his immortal aperture, like Mo Yao's will, would Fang Yuan be able to easily suppress it. Like this, the strongest existence and ruler of Imperial Court Blessed Land finally dispersed in smoke, not leaving even a trace of it behind. Hei Lou Lan let out a breath of turbid air before looking at Fang Yuan with a tranquil gaze, speaking in a serious tone. Now, let's have a good discussion. I believe we have the foundation for cooperation. Fang Yuan nodded, sneering. Before speaking of anything else, the Immortal Gu fixed immortal travel you seized is mine. That formless fist which seized fixed immortal travel had been broken by Giant Sun's will. After Giant Sun's will seized the Immortal Gu, he forcibly suppressed Fang Yuan's will within the Gu but did not have time to refine it, or it may be that he did not have the strength to forcibly refine it. Thus, Fang Yuan was not able to sense the connection with fixed immortal travel. He had lost track of the target earlier and thought the formless fist had already torn through space and left. I know, this is precisely one of my conditions. Right now, I am suppressing your Immortal Gu, but there is no time for me to forcibly refine it. I need you to lend me this fixed immortal travel. Hei Lou Lan made an astonishing demand. Fang Yuan had a calm expression. Why should I lend it to you? Humph, the Gu is on me, and without fixed immortal travel, how can you escape from here? Only if we sincerely cooperate, can we have the chance to escape. Hei Lou Lan said. Fang Yuan chuckled. Who told you I don't have other methods to leave this place? Hei Lou Lan's pupils shrunk as she looked at Fang Yuan deeply. The wind veil of assimilation isolates the outside world from the inside. Gu like whole earth Gu and connecting heaven Gu cannot be used. You actually have another method, but you didn't use it even until now. It seems this method has its flaws. She was a formidable character, regaining her cool quickly and even carrying a probing counterattack. She sounded extremely certain, but she was not that sure inwardly and was only probing. Fang Yuan laughed loudly. His Strength Path Phantom army was beside him and he did not fear the self-detonation of great strength true martial physique. However, his opponent was not any ordinary person of the great strength true martial physique, but Hei Lou Lan. This fellow could not be underestimated. They had contested repeatedly in 88 True Yang building but they were evenly matched. In fact, she even caused much trouble to Fang Yuan. Now, she was clearly still immortal but was able to suppress 4 Immortal Gu, causing even Giant Sun's will to be surprised. If Fang Yuan did not lend her fixed immortal travel, she was sure to die. But he still had some fear if she counterattacked at the risk of her life. Without the intervention of Imo Yao's will, Fang Yuan had returned to his original nature. He calculated his profits. Shortly after, he asked the most crucial question, then, what can I obtain? Immortal Gu Dark Limit. Hei Lou Lan calmly replied, but inwardly she let out a breath of relief. Oh, I would like to hear the details. I will help you obtain this Gu. This Gu is in the hands of Gu Immortal Jiangyu. It can conceal aura, hide heavenly secrets and protect you from deductions. My great strength true martial physique was sealed with the help of Immortal Gu Dark Limit. You have caused such a huge incident, Northern Plains Gu Immortals will definitely track you down and cause troubles for you. Not only them, there are also the arrangements left behind by Giant Sun Immortal Venerable. But with Immortal Gu Dark Limit, your location will not be discovered. Interesting, what else? Fang Yuan rubbed his chin. Hei Lou Lan smiled, we are both smart people, I will speak frankly. I shoulder a huge hatred and grudge so I cannot self-detonate to kill you with me. But you also probably don't want to force me until I drag you along with me, right? Humph, you are unlikely to kill me, but it is true that it will be really troublesome. Fang Yuan gave a cold snort. Hei Lou Lan's pupils shrunk. From your words, it seems you still haven't fully displayed the power of your killer move. But I also have another trump card. Fang Yuan nodded. Hei Lou Lan had already displayed it just before. She could suppress Immortal Gu, which was not possible by just relying on great strength true martial physique. As long as there were enough profits, there was no need for bloodfest. Fang Yuan was not afraid of Hei Lou Lan's self-detonation, but there would be no benefits to both of them if he pushed her too far. Hei Lou Lan continued, I will help you obtain Immortal Gu Dark Limit and will also return fixed immortal travel once I finish using it. I will also give you my Strength Path Killer move, I believe it will provide some help to your new killer move. Moreover, I haven't killed your senior brother Tai Bai Yunsheng. Fang Yuan glanced at Tai Bai Yunsheng who was lying on the ground in unconsciousness, with his body covered by a defensive barrier. This was clearly Hei Lou Lan's work. His evaluation of Hei Lou Lan could not help but rise by a level. Hei Lou Lan was truly not simple, she actually protected Tai Bai Yunsheng until now. Clearly, she was dissatisfied with Giant Sun's will and had been scheming against it. More importantly, she gave many benefits. Immortal Gu Dark Limit was an important benefit, fixed immortal travel was second, then the Strength Path Killer move and finally Tai Bai Yunsheng. Such an arrangement showed how much she understood Fang Yuan. Then your condition is? Fang Yuan asked. Protect me during my Gu Immortal Ascension and also help me when I kill my father personally. Hei Lou Lan's eyes revealed extreme hatred when she said this. Fang Yuan's brows involuntarily rose up. He did not ask why, and he did not need a reason. Ha ha ha. Fang Yuan laughed brightly. He looked at the surrounding wind veil of assimilation then turned towards Hei Lou Lan. Hei Lou Lan, who had torn off the seal of Dark Limit and revealed her true appearance, was no longer an obese and fierce bear. Instead she had a stimulating, charming body with sharp brows and bright eyes. She was a remarkably beautiful woman filled with a tyrannical aura. Interesting. Well, there is no harm in cooperating for the moment. Fang Yuan praised as he agreed. The benefits of this cooperation were truly shocking. In any case, fixed immortal travel was in Hei Lou Lan's hands. Fang Yuan was also helpless about that and so he might as well cooperate. Next, Fang Yuan mentioned his own conditions and reached a basic consensus with Hei Lou Lan. The shrinking of the wind veil of assimilation had almost reached the extreme. Large numbers of Gu accumulated in the narrow space, crowding together. Many Gu worms were already devoured by the wind veil of assimilation, becoming a part of it. But the tribulation, formless hands, were also completely gone. There is no time today, we will talk more in the future. After a rough agreement, Hei Lou Lan activated fixed immortal travel. Dark green light covered her body. She was not a Gu immortal, but astonishingly, she could activate Immortal Gu. Before leaving, she gave a deep glance at Fang Yuan and asked, seemingly without much thought, "Your killer move, what is its name?" "Myriad Self." Fang Yuan replied. Hei Lou Lan nodded, engraving this name to the depths of her heart. She knew that sooner or later, this killer move's name would rise to fame and spread throughout the 5 regions. The next moment, fixed immortal travel activated and Hei Lou Lan disappeared. The moment she left, Fang Yuan immediately destroyed the surroundings to prevent her from using fixed immortal travel to return. Wind veil of assimilation was already pressing in very closely, there was only a cabin-sized space left for Fang Yuan to move. Large numbers of Gu worms were already devoured by the wind veil of assimilation, while there were still a few that were flying around. Fang Yuan released Starlight Firefly Gu and opened the Stargate. But he did not leave immediately, instead deeply gazing at these flying Gu worms. He did not have any certainty, but still wanted to give it a try. A few breaths later, a Gu worm flew towards him of its own accord. Rank 9 Wisdom Gu. Ha ha ha. In the narrow space, Fang Yuan's laughter was echoing endlessly. Chapter 650, Return to Hu Immortal Blessed Land. Book 4, The Demon Lord Rampages Unhindered. Slowly opening his eyes, Fang Yuan woke up. Seeing crystal walls sparkling with a bright pink-colored light, Fang Yuan was dazed. Before reacting, he had used the Stargate to return to Hu Immortal Blessed Land from Northern Plains. Except that in this trip to Northern Plains, he had exhausted his mind and spirit. It was such a dangerous trip, it was a near-fatal experience. Even though Fang Yuan's body was that of 6-armed Heavenly Zombie King, his mind was still filled with fatigue. After returning to Hu Immortal Blessed Land, he made some arrangements and fell into deep sleep. He slowly woke up now, after sleeping for an unknown amount of time. He was very exhausted. Even now, Fang Yuan only wanted to lie down and not get up. My body is filled with death energy, I have completely turned into a zombie, my body knows no fatigue, but my soul is still my original soul, it has its limits and will suffer injuries too. A thought flashed in his mind, as Fang Yuan gradually got up. His mind was in tranquility, it was a comfortable feeling. Sleeping had the effect of soothing one's soul. Fang Yuan breathed out some turbid air, stretching his limbs, but he only felt like his body was rusty, he felt very inflexible and heavy. He was not surprised, he knew that this was the backlash of using his killer move, Myriad Self, his soul was greatly depleted. Thus, when he tried to move this extremely strong zombie body, he felt difficulty and resistance. Where is the land spirit? Fang Yuan spoke. His voice was coarse and irritating, like the sound of sand grinding on ice shards, it would give a dry and icy feeling to people. Master. At the next moment, the land spirit Little Hu Immortal's voice resounded in Fang Yuan's ears. The voice was still cute and sweet, but there was a hint of worry and sadness in it. Fang Yuan turned around, only to see Little Hu Immortal appearing before his left hand with reddened eyes. How long have I been asleep? Fang Yuan nodded, asking. Master, you have been asleep for 2 days and 3 nights. Little Hu Immortal replied. Fang Yuan recalled, 2 days and 3 nights was in terms of Hu Immortal Blessed Land time. 5 days in Hu Immortal Blessed Land was 1 day in the outside world of the 5 regions. That means that since Fang Yuan left the wind veil of assimilation, less than a day had passed in northern plains. Vischten. Velbin. C. M for new updates. Fang Yuan's inner thoughts settled. Before he slept, he had made an agreement with Hei Lou Lan. They were temporarily cooperating, thus, he would have to return to northern plains soon. Little Hu Immortal saw that Fang Yuan was silent, and thought he was upset. She opened her tiny mouth and consoled, Master, Master, don't be too upset. Your current appearance, although it is quite ugly, I'm sure there's a way to change it back. I believe that one day, Master will go back to his original form. Master, you have to cheer up. Fang Yuan laughed speechlessly, stretching out one arm and touching Little Hu Immortal's tiny head. Little Hu Immortal dodged for a bit, but eventually, Fang Yuan's terrifying giant zombie hand landed on her head. She lowered her head, not making a sound. Fang Yuan started stroking her hair and Little Hu Immortal could not take it anymore. She cried, Master, although your palm is icy cold, I still like it. Saying this, she hugged Fang Yuan's huge legs and began sobbing. Little Hu Immortal was still so cute. She was like a 5 to 6-year-old child, pure and innocent, cute and tiny. She wore a rainbow dress and her snow-white fox tail was drooping towards the ground, showing her current sad mood. The land spirit was formed from the fusion of obsession and heavenly power. It was different from Will's and would never lie. Little Hu Immortal spoke the honest truth. Fang Yuan's expression was calm, he did not speak. But the fangs that were outside his mouth retracted a little, and the movement of his hand stroking Little Hu Immortal's head became more gentle. He split a portion of his consciousness and looked inside his body. In the first aperture, there was dead silence. There was not a bit of primeval essence inside, only Fang Yuan's first vital Gu. The originally clear crystal purple walls had turned into a rock-like material. The rock wall was filled with small cracks. The culprit behind this wound was the spring-autumn cicada in the middle of his aperture. Spring-autumn cicada's body was glowing with green and yellow light. The aura of a rank 6 Immortal Gu was permeating the entire aperture. If it was his rank 5 peak stage aperture, it might have burst already. But now that the aperture was dead, it could handle more of the Immortal Gu's pressure. Even though there was a limit, he was far from reaching it yet. At the same time, Fang Yuan also noticed that the aperture was completely dry and could not produce any more primeval essence. This is the price for turning into a zombie. The aperture is dead and cannot produce any primeval essence. Fang Yuan assessed in his mind. He could not help but think of first-gen Gu Yu. He had turned into a blood white and his aperture could not produce primeval essence, thus he had great desire for Gu worms like heavenly essence treasure lotus. My current situation is way better than first-gen Gu Yu. I have already ascended into an immortal. I have 19 green grape immortal essence and limitless primeval essence. Thinking of this, Fang Yuan moved his consciousness from the first aperture to the second aperture. The newly born strength path immortal aperture had also turned gray. The blessed land was now a dead land. The sky was gray and the white stone mountains had collapsed. The ground was rotten and dark, emitting a foul odor. The ground was full of cracks, like the aftermath of an earthquake. This was the result of forcefully containing wisdom Gu. Inside this immortal aperture were almost all of Fang Yuan's Gu worms. The most attention-grabbing ones were naturally the Immortal Gu. There were 7 Immortal Gu in here. This amount was bound to shock others if revealed publicly. Immortal Gu were unique, they were extremely hard to get. Most ordinary Gu immortals would not even have one Immortal Gu. If he included fixed immortal travel that he had lent to Hei Lou Lan, as well as spring-autumn cicada, Fang Yuan had a total of 9 Immortal Gu. This number could put most rank 7 Gu immortals to shame. There were 3 Immortal Gu that were related to Water Pavilion. They were, Worldly Wave Trace Gu, Delight in Mountain and Water Gu and Calamity Beckoning Gu. The other 4 Immortal Gu were obtained when Fang Yuan painstakingly smashed the Formless fists. Other than the Immortal Gu, there were Mortal Gu. The most valuable Mortal Gu were also obtained when Fang Yuan smashed the Formless fists. All these Gu worms originated from the true inheritance secluded domain's many inheritances, each of them were high-quality Gu worms and had profound differences from common Gu. But of greater importance was the second aperture's Vital Gu, Rank 4 All-Out Effort Gu, as well as Bitter Strength Gu, Borrow Strength Gu, Self-Reliance Gu, Refine Essence Spirit Gu, Earth Strength Gu, Water Strength Gu, Wind Strength Gu, Lightning Strength Gu, Fire Strength Gu, Lurking Beast Coat Gu, Aura Concealment Gu and so on. It was these Gu worms that formed the foundation of the killer move Myriad itself, allowing Fang Yuan to ultimately clinch victory within the wind veil of assimilation. Other than these, there were the other random Gu worms, like the Eagle Rise Gu which Fang Yuan had used and expended the most in this journey within Northern Plains. The Wind Flower Gu which could allow changes in direction easily, the Soul Blade Gu obtained from Soul Blade General Pan Ping. There was also the Battle Bone Will Gu, Stargate Gu, and the Gu that made up the foundation of a Gu Immortal, Whole Earth Gu, Connecting Heaven Gu, Divine Sense Gu and others. The highest quantity that he had among them were of beggar moths, almost 1,000 of them. They had the effect of storing primeval essence. They were a huge help to Fang Yuan during the final moments of his Northern Plains trip. After inspecting his mortal and immortal aperture, Fang Yuan directed his attention to his body. Without using a mirror, he knew that he had turned into a monster completely. 6 meters tall, a green face and sharp fangs, blood-red eyes, bulging muscles that were tough as rocks. Most importantly, he had 8 arms, other than his 2 human arms. His other 6 arms were terrifying in appearance. They originated from the other rank 5 Flying Zombie Gu, Azura Zombie Gu, Heavenly Demon Zombie Gu, Blood White Gu, Nightmare Zombie Gu, Plague Zombie Gu, and Earth Chief Zombie Gu. Fang Yuan did not care whether his appearance was handsome or ugly. Little Hu Immortal was concerned about it because she was formed from the obsession of the female Gu Immortal, Fairy by Hu. What Fang Yuan cared about was that the zombie body caused his cultivation to stagnate. He was unable to advance his cultivation in the slightest. This was a huge obstacle in his pursuit of the demonic path and his dream. He had grand ambitions. He wanted to obtain eternal life. Eternal life was in reference to being the strongest, an indestructible being that cannot be taken down by tribulations or disasters, a person that cannot be harmed by anyone, as well as having infinite lifespan. Although a zombie body had no lifespan, his soul could still suffer damage, and his body could still be destroyed if he was attacked by someone stronger than him. There were still many flaws and weaknesses. Thus, many Gu Masters and Gu Immortals would turn into zombies only after they were left with no other choice. This method was truly a last resort for survival. It was like longing towards heaven while being in hell. How can I get rid of the zombie body, returning to life from death, and obtain a live human body again? Fang Yuan asked in his heart. Evidently, this was a problem that needed to be solved. Although he had no answers, he had some rough ideas. Interrogating Mo Yao's will who was in his immortal aperture was one method. Using Wisdom Gu was the second. Little Hu Immortal's crying slowly stopped. As Fang Yuan retracted his hand, his emotions calmed down as he asked, "During the days when I was asleep, did anything happen?" Little Hu Immortal heard her master's inquiry and immediately stood up straight. She wiped her tears and answered him maturely, reporting to Master, "There were 2 things. First, your senior brother, Tai Bai Yun Sheng, had already woken up. He has been wanting to meet you over these last few days. He was so anxious he even cried several times. But Master had given me the orders, thus I refused to let him in. The second matter is regarding Immortal Crane sect. They have stopped engaging in our Rockmen transactions." Fang Yuan heard this and frowned lightly. Fang Yuan was well aware of the reason why Immortal Crane sect stopped the Rockmen transactions. Hu Immortal blessed land had Dang Hun Mountain. This was something known by everyone in Central Continent. Immortal Crane's sect's target was Dang Hun Mountain, but they could not attack Hu Immortal Blessed Land directly, thus over a year ago, they had sent Fang Zheng to negotiate, eventually settling on the transactions of rockmen. But their primary objective was Dang Hun Mountain and the Daoist Gu. After that, Immortal Crane's sect had repeatedly urged and emphasized while requesting Fang Yuan to sell the Daoist Gu, but he refused them every time. After a year, seeing that Hu Immortal Blessed Land was refusing to give in, Immortal Crane's sect had lost their patience, thus stopping the rockmen trade. As to whether they would express anger and want to force Fang Yuan to renegotiate, or whether they have other objectives, that would depend on how the situation progresses. Hu Immortal Blessed Land is not a utopia, it is located at Tian Ti Mountain, and the outside situation is also perilous. If Fang Yuan had a blessed land as an immortal aperture, his reliance towards Hu Immortal Blessed Land would greatly reduce. He could even swallow Hu Immortal Blessed Land directly, making his escape and leaving this place. Unfortunately, he was now a zombie, his immortal aperture was a dead aperture, there was no way to consider this. Fang Yuan thought about it, but for now could not come up with any ideas. Damn it, after becoming a zombie, my cognitive abilities have weakened, my thoughts are moving slower and slower, it is too inefficient. Fang Yuan frowned deeply, he started to feel the drawback of the zombie body.